of grey water the reeds said together, hearth and heart and harvest we yield up to you, my lord. Our swords and spears and arrows are yours to command. Grant mercy to our weak, help to our helpless, and justice to all, and we shall never fail you. I swear it by earth and water, said the boy in green. I swear it by bronze and iron, his sister said. We swear it by ice and fire, they finished together. Rise, Uncle Ned replied. Lady Mira got to her feet and helped her brother up. We bring you gifts of fish and frog and fowl, he said. Arya will like these reeds, John thought. He could see his cousin smiling, with a frog leg in her mouth. I thank you. Uncle Ned said, I offer you the meat and mead of Winterfell. Serving men hurried to lengthen the table on the dais for the reeds, fetching trestles and chairs. John heard no more from where he sat. He ate, and waited, and when his mother finally came to find him, she said simply, let us ride. They went to the stables in silence, mounted their horses and rose past the gatehouse, over the drawbridge, and through the outer walls, Ghost running beside them. Further back came 4 guardsmen. Beyond the castle was the market square once again, though no one came out to greet them today. Side by side, the cold wind whipping at their faces and hair, they urged their mounts off the King's Road and into the Wolf's Wood. The guards fell back and John and his mother rode on slowly, away from their ears. He felt like a boy, awaiting his punishment. I should have sold that dragon egg years ago, she said, quietly, almost to herself. We could live in comfort in one of the free cities for the rest of our lives with that money. I gave it back to my father, John said, and knew he sounded stupid as he did. His father had wished for him to sleep with it always, but John could not remember ever having done so. His mother had removed it and it sat at the bottom of an ironwood chest until John finally returned it to the king. What use would it be to him, at the wall? It was naught but an old stone to him, and not worth dying over at the hand of some desperate black brother. My place is here, not in Essos. His mother frowned. I prayed in the Godswood all night for the old gods to give me the words to say to you now and steer you away from this madness, but I am at a loss. This path you are starting on, you will regret it when it is too late to turn back. But it is not too late now. Stay in Winterfell, as Ned has offered. Her voice regained its edge now, but it was not anger which tempered it but desperation. I will speak to Rhaegar, if it is him you fear. He would do this for me, if I asked him. Do what? He will forget whatever promises you made him. She pulled back the reins of her horse now and stilled to face him. John could hardly face his mother. He had made promises, and it shamed him to think of them now. I promise I will be brave. I promise I will be strong. I promise I will play my part. What had compelled him? When he was away from his father, it felt like a jape at best, and madness at worst. He could not remember a time when he did not know the stories. The Song of Ice and Fire. The Three-Headed Dragon. His father filled his head with them and his mother prohibited talk of it. She did not have to, the stories frightened John as a boy. He did not want to think of doom or destiny, and dragons had held no sway over his imagination. As a man, he had come to understand the blood price that had been paid for his birth. Ned Stark may have protected his children from the full truth of it, but Lyanna had not done the same. John knew of how Rickard Stark had burned alive in his own armor, as his son suffocated trying to reach for his sword. Done at the behest of my grandfather. That had been a hard thing to live with. Even Robb had not known that. He had thought them beheaded and began to doubt it, and asked John for the truth. There were others too, hundreds dead, not by John's hand but for his birth. There were battles fought and banners raised before his father and mother finally emerged from Dorne, and put an end to it. And it had all been for naught. He was not the princess his father expected, and his mother could not bear another child and survive it. When John was his father, some part of him believed the tales, or wanted to. It was like a spell the king put him under, which had him believing things he knew to be false, making promises to a man to whom he owed nothing. I wish to go, John said instead. Uncle Ben was only a boy when he took his vows. I am 4 years older than he was then. I have been trained by the finest knights in Westeros and I understand what it means. Benjen took his vows in grief and guilt, his mother responded. Her hands squeezed white around the reins. And because he had neither mother nor father to forbid him. You are not your uncle. John replied. I have better reasons than he did. You do? She asked, with false incredulity. I am baseborn. His mother at least did not flinch when he said it, the way Uncle Ned did. She looked at him, with her grey eyes. I will never hold lands nor wear a crown. Any legitimate child of mine would forever be in danger. And to live unwed with a woman, and bear a bastard by her. I would rather die. You all speak to me like I am ignorant of what my choice means. I have nothing to sacrifice. I am giving up nothing. He did not want to shame himself by weeping, but his face had grown warm, and his words caught in his throat. Nothing. Do you think so little of what I have given you? She asked. Lionel was not angry. She was only sad. Somehow, that made it worse. And because of that you will give your life to chase after some fantasy of a hero standing at world's end. She had given him many things. She had given him courage and love. He could not deny that, even in his most difficult moments. John had not seen her temper until he was a man, and even then, it was rarely directed at him. As a boy, she was all tenderness and care and safety. But of all that she had given him, none had he paid a dearer price for than his birth. He might have said that to her, years ago, when the injustice and shame of it was still raw in him. That anger had shed its skin and became a thing transformed, and for a time he had nursed some spite towards his father, for not legitimizing him when he could. It did not matter now. He would carry the stain of it with him forever. I go because I have no other choice, he said, finally. It felt ugly to say it, like exposing an unhealed wound. For all his talk of honor and duty, it was no true choice. The place on the King's Guard would be filled by young Laura's Tyrell. John had known that all along. Old Town had been his father's wish, not his own. He did not have the mind for it, nor the nature. To give counsel to some lord, to birth and teach his children, and to swear to him an oath of allegiance, it was not something he could bear. Better to be a brother among many on the wall, than a servant to any. I go for your sake and for mine. And for that of his father and Egon too. He did love them, no matter how barbed that felt at times. Please, mother. Kiss me and give me your blessing. Tell me you will write to me. I will write to you, always. And I will come to Winterfell, for Sansa's wedding or the births of Robb's sons, and we will see each other then. He was begging, he realized. At least let us part without anger. Please. 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 His mother was silent, staring ahead into the forest, her jaw moving, clenching and unclenching, trying to hold the words in, or perhaps say them out. I cannot, she said finally, and when she set her eyes on him they were stern and cold. Depart, if you wish, but you so without my blessing. John wanted to weep. He wanted to leave, now, ride away with Ghost and go, where? There was nowhere for him. Only the wall. If that is how it will be, so be it, he made himself say. So be it. Saying goodbye was the hardest thing John had ever done. With each word, he could not help but wonder if they would be the last words exchanged between them. His cousins embraced him, and extracted promises that he would attend the next harvest feast. Lady Catelyn told him she would pray for him, and though Uncle Ned seemed sad, he did not plead for him to stay behind. His mother did not come out of the keep. John tried to swallow that hurt. And they rode. John had never been farther north than Winterfell. It was colder here somehow, and quieter than any other place he had been. West of the road were Flint Hills, grey and rugged, with tall watchtowers on their stony summits. To the east the land was lower, the ground flattening to a rolling plain that stretched away as far as the eye could see. Stone bridges spanned swift, narrow rivers, while small farms spread in rings around holdfasts walled in wood and stone. The road was well trafficked, and at night for their comfort there were rude inns to be found. 3 days' ride from Winterfell, however, the farmland gave way to dense wood, and the King's Road grew lonely. The Flint Hills rose higher and wilder with each passing mile, until by the 5th day they had turned into mountains, cold blue-grey giants with jagged promontories and snow on their shoulders. When the wind blew from the north, long plumes of ice crystals flew from the high peaks like banners. With the mountains a wall to the west, the road veered north by northeast through the Wolf's Wood, though no part John had ever hunted in before. Their nights came alive with the howls of distant packs, and some not so distant. Ghost pricked up his ears at the nightly howling, but never raised his own voice in reply. Grey Wind yelped and would make as though to chase after them, but would sit in silence with a single word from Rob. There were 30 in the party by then. Sir Arthur travelled with 15 of the king's knights who would be taking their vows alongside John. Rob had brought 10 guards of his own from Winterfell for the princess' comfort, and Uncle Benjen rode with fresh mounts for the night's watch, and a cage of ravens from Maestlawin. At the edge of the Wolf's Wood, they stayed a night behind the wooden walls of a forest holdfast, and there were joined by Yoren. The Black Brother had a twisted shoulder and a sour smell, his hair and bare matted and greasy and full of lice, his clothing old, patched, and seldom washed. He brought with him a pair of ragged boys, and when he explained that they were rapers, the princess' eyes had widened. She did not have to protest. Rob must have spoken for her, for when John rose in the morning, Yoren and the 2 peasants were gone, sent along on the road with 3 of the Winterfell guard. John was grateful for it. He did not wish to stay long in their company either. Farms and holdfasts grew scarcer and smaller as they pressed northward. Finally there were no more roofs to shelter under. The nights were well below freezing now, and though John had known it would be cold, had read 100 masters' accounts of winter at his father's behest, it was another thing to try to live it now. Rob did his best to feign that it did not bother him. He often pulled down the scarf covering his face to ask Uncle Ben questions of the road and the places they passed, his breath like steam. Daenerys was mostly silent. If she cursed John for being the cause of her misery, he would not have been able to hear her under all the furs she wore. She did not seem angry at her husband, at least. By day, when they were not riding, she sat wordlessly at Rob's side. By night, when the wind was not too strong, it carried the faint sounds of their love-making. He shared shelter with Benjen, but if his uncle heard it too he gave no signs. On those nights, John slept with his cloak wrapped over his head. When he finally heard his aunt speak, the sound of her voice nearly startled him. Rob was still abed, and the princess sat around the fire at dawn, sharing a meager breakfast of heated oats with Sir Arthur. If the Dornishman suffered in the cold, he did not show it. John grabbed a bowl and sat beside them. His aunt was as a stranger to him, but he was not as uneasy in her company as he had been when they first met. She was kind to his cousins, from what little he saw, and Rob had taken to calling her my wife, though John suspected that was more a matter of wanting to seem as a man grown and wed than a term of endearment. John, at least, could give her courtesy. The knight and the princess had been speaking before his arrival, and continued the conversation after the exchange of some pleasantries. "I will not ride with you to Winterfell, your grace," Sir Arthur said. "My journey will take me to Eastwatch by the sea, and onwards by ship to King's Landing. Is there some message you would like me to deliver to the king?" Daenerys pulled down her face covering, and John saw her cheeks were red. Though they were not more than a year apart in age, suddenly she seemed so young. "I am trying my best. You may tell him that. If I may speak plainly, you have done well," Sir Arthur said. "And so I shall tell his grace." John wondered idly what she had accomplished in her time in Winterfell that was worthy of such praise. "When I was a girl, Viserys taught me a riddle." Her voice was strange, as though it fought with the air to get the words out. "Who listens to everything yet hears nothing?" A knight of the King's Guard. Sir Arthur was solemn. The princess covered her face once more, as though to make a barrier between what her words and the way they would sit in the world. "My mother." She let the word sit for a moment. "You would have known her only as an older woman, perhaps." Even still, every word seemed like it pained her to say. Was she happy in her marriage? In the end, it was difficult. But were there moments, at least, when she smiled true? Sir Arthur's expression betrayed nothing. "It is not for me to say," he replied. "Forgive me, but I cannot speak of it." "At the king's command?" Sir Arthur frowned. "No, your grace. Not at his command." "But if they did not love each other, why did they wed?" Aegon was king then, and he was not fond of the custom of siblings wedding one another. Sir Arthur would not respond to that either. It was his way. John had spent half a year with him in Dorne, and so he had been there. King Jaehaerys commanded it, John found himself saying. He had known the story since he was a boy. The princess' ignorance surprised him. A woods witch told him that the prince that was promised would be born from their line. Daenerys turned to face him, and her voice was all confusion. A woods witch. Yes, a friend to Jenny of Oldstones. She died in Summerhall, he replied. Jon knew all of this and more. How did she not? Robb's voice came from across the camp, and Daenerys fell quiet once more. They rode on for another week longer and caught sight of the wall when they still miles away. It was a pale blue line across the northern horizon, stretching away to the east and west and vanishing in the far distance, immense and unbroken. They had come, finally, to the end of the world. For a century at least, the Watch had been a shadow of what it once was. His father had tried to change that, and every victory he wrung out was daily won. To Southron lords, the wall is nothing, the king had explained, they do not understand. They sent the wall their worse, rapers and thieves and murderers, and his father had tried to pick off lords' sons, as much as he could, third or fourth born with nothing to inherit. He had raised his own soldiers too, taking boys from orphanages and poor houses. The Watch had built 19 great strongholds along the wall, and half were occupied. His father said it was not enough. Another 2 days and they spied Castle Black, its timbered keeps and stone towers looking like nothing more than a handful of toy blocks scattered on the snow, beneath the vast wall of ice. The ancient stronghold of the Black Brothers was no Winterfell, no true castle at all. Lacking walls, it could not be defended, not from the south, or east, or west, but it was only the north that concerned the Night's Watch, and to the north loomed the wall. Almost 700 feet high it stood, 3 times the height of the tallest tower in the stronghold it sheltered. It was like nothing else in the world. Jon could feel the great weight of all that ice pressing down on him, as if it were about to topple, and somehow he knew that if it fell, the world fell with it. There would be no warm welcome for him. Their company parted once they were within Castle Black, Jon with Uncle Ben and the knights who would take their vows alongside him, and Robb and the Princess Daenerys with Sir Arthur and their guard. Robb would sleep in the King's Tower, and dine at the Lord Commander's own table. And Jon, he would be given a cold bed in a small room, alongside hundreds of men like him, scraped together from the unwanted places. Notes. As always, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to read and engage with my writing. It is incredibly motivating to read your comments and learn which parts of the story are resonating for you, and I really appreciate your time reading and engaging with the story. Finally, a Jon POV. This is one that I was very hesitant to introduce, but I don't think we can do without it. We will not get to see many of these, but the wall and what's beyond it play a big part in this story, as well as the various visitors it will receive, which we'll see through Jon. Also, I want to clarify that Jon's reflections of his parents and their relationship is just that, his perspective. As their son, he was exposed to a very particular part of their history and dynamic, and kept in the dark about other things. Similarly, we see this in his reflections on Aegon. These are very much his interpretations, coming from a place of deep pain. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel in this chapter with classic scenes, like Jon giving Arya a needle, the Reed's Oath, and descriptions of the journey to the wall. So many of those parts are from the books. While the chapter is central to Jon's character, we are seeing things come into place for others, such as Bran and, in a very different way, Dany coming up. And even though we're taking a break from Winterfell, it's not the last we'll see of Lyanna. Chapter 9, Daenerys v. Summary. Warning, descriptions of childbirth and references to sex. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Dany did not like this place. Her discomfort came from the wall itself, the way it wept water and yet did not shrink, its blue glimmer and the magic that bound it. For it was surely magic. Here, Dany could believe the stories that spells were woven into it. Her husband was transformed here, with a look so cold and words so pointed that no one could doubt he was a Stark. He hid his surprise or his fear, and spoke with the voice of a man who was accustomed to such wonders and who had been long taught that winter was coming. After they were greeted by the Lord Commander and ate a small meal in his chambers, Robb was invited to climb the and Daenerys stood with his wolf, and watched him ascend a wooden stair that rose up to the south face, anchored on a huge rough-hewn beam sunk deep into the ice and frozen in place. Back and forth it switched, clawing its way upward as crooked as a bolt of lightning, but her husband did not look back, or down. There was a cage, she'd learned, but he'd chosen the harder path. Soon, he was lost to her, too far up, and there was nothing left to do but go to their rooms in the king's tower. His wolf did not join her, choosing instead to remain outside and wait. Idly, once alone, Dany wondered if she should seek out Aemon Targaryen. He was an old man, though, and the day had grown long, and even with the Stark guardsmen that had set out with them, she had no wish to make her way through the keep after dark. She thought of Jon instead. Her brother's son was somewhere here, too, and here he would stay long after they had left. Robb's seat would be in Winterfell, and despite how harsh the winters he would one day face, it could not compare to this, no matter how often the Starks repeated their words. It had been a hard parting for Jon. No one had raged or wept in her presence, but she could see it on their faces all the same, Lyanna Stark most of all. She had not been as Dany imagined. In her mind's eye, Lyanna shifted between the lovely young maiden who had captured a prince's heart all those years ago, and the witch the stories said she was, who brewed potions in the Kingswood. In truth, she was only a woman, more beautiful than some others, but a living, breathing woman nonetheless, with frown lines on her forehead and the beginnings of grey in her thick, dark hair. It was Robb who came to Daenerys that night, not with anger and accusation, but with sadness and searching for comfort. After he had taken his pleasure, as they laid naked and almost sleeping in the dark, the idea began to form in his mind, of escorting Jon to the wall. She did not have the heart to dissuade him. Tonight, Dany waited by the fire, fighting sleep, and her thoughts turned to her brothers instead. Dany ached for them. She had thought to write to them once she was here, and even to Eleanor, to thrill them with the arrival of a raven from the wall, but she did not have the words to describe what she saw. They were so far away, in such warm places. And what did she have to write of? The disaster with Arya Stark in the neck. The girl's angry looks since. The arrival of Rhaegar's old mistress. Escorting his bastard son to the wall. When her husband finally came to her, he seemed to bring in all the cold with him, snowflakes on his shoulders and in his hair, his wolf as ever at his side. With his cheeks red from cold and his lips chapped, Robb was familiar to her once again. The man she'd been wed to, laid beside and lain with, each day for a month now. A month, could that be right? At times, she felt she knew him only a little better than she had in the first few days of marriage, when they were surrounded by Bannerman and his kin. At others, she could recognize something else in him, something boyish and vulnerable. "You're still awake," he said. He shook off his cloak at the door, and came to sit beside her. "Yes." Dany knelt down to unlace his boots. "I hope all went well." He studied her for a moment, as though deciding whether to confide in her. The gesture was common, and aggrieved her each time. Mormont had naught but distressing news. "He is losing men to the Rangings, and more wildlings are slipping past the wall than ever before. My father thinks a day will come soon when we will have to call the banners and ride north to face the man they have styled king beyond the wall." After hearing Mormont's words, "I think that day will come sooner than we thought." That was not at all. He stared at the fire now. "He spoke of darker things too," Robb added, quietly. "The woods have filled with wild creatures. Fisherfolk near Eastwatch have seen White Walkers on the shore." "White Walkers?" Dany asked, astounded. Could that be true? They had been gone for 8,000 years, or so the tales said. How could the fisherfolk know what they had seen, then? "No," Robb said, quickly. "I do not know." He read the astonishment on her face. "Do not let it trouble you. The wildlings are another matter. But these strange tales, they are only tales." "But perhaps not." "Perhaps not," Robb repeated, watching the flames. What would that mean? Dany could not begin to guess. War, for certain. And winter. And the end of the world. And yet she had seen things too, in Dragonstone and in her dreams, things she knew could not be true. Dragons in the flames, living deep within the castle. Before she left the island, she'd heard tales on the port of Kraken sighted from the bows of trading galleys. "I will speak to my father," he said, quietly. "And the king?" "Mormont has written to him. Rhaegar will know what to do. He always knew what to do." There was a softness to Robb's expression as he turned to look at her. "My lady, you have nothing to fear. You will be safe within Winterfell's walls." Sometimes, rarely, Dany saw a glimpse of a sweetness in her husband. "As will you." It may not come to that. There may be peace yet. It was strange, wrong, even as she said it. But she swallowed the feeling. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Robb, lying in the candlelight beside her, worry etched across his face. In the morning, she sought out Aemon Targaryen. Arthur Dayne escorted her through the cold, and into a stout wooden keep below the rookery where two men met them at the door. They mumbled their names as they bowed to her, Chet and Clydas, and did not look her in the eyes as they led them into a small library where a fire was raging. They excused themselves once they were within, and left her with her Sir Arthur and her kinsman. The Maester sat in the dark chair by the fire, in robes so black it was as though he was swallowed up by it. Dany did not know what she expected. He was ancient, the oldest man in Westeros, and yet she had imagined him as a taller version of Rhaegar, with more wrinkles perhaps but broader and strongly made. The man before her was thin and shrunken and wrinkled, smaller even than Robb's little brother. She stood awkwardly for a moment, before remembering the Maester was blind. "My prince," she almost said. But that was wrong. This man who might have been king was no different than any of the other brothers on the wall. "Maester Aemon," she said instead. "I hope I am not disturbing you." He turned to her, with cloudy eyes. "Your Grace." "Daenerys." "Daenerys," he repeated, smiling now. "And I am escorted by Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning." "Maester Aemon." "You may call on me in place of your stewards," the knight said. "Thank you, sir." "Daenerys," he reached out a hand in her direction and Dany moved closer, taking a seat beside him. She saw now how heavily chain hung over the thin skin of his neck. He might have worn a crown instead. "It gladdens my heart to have you here, though it is a poor place for a young bride. It pleases me to meet you as well." His hand lay on the arm of the chair, so white that his veins were visible, like pale green roots. Dany put her hands over his. "He is my kin, here alone. His brother was my great-grandfather. King Aegon would have held my mother as a child, watched her wed and her belly grow large when she bore Rhaegar. They were all gone now, and yet he was here. This is a strange and beautiful place." "It is," the old man said. "And you are the first princess to grace it." That was a queer thought. The good Queen Alysanne had come here on Silverwing, used her own coin for the construction of the castle they called Deep Lake. Daenerys' time here would be a poor comparison. Had he been the first prince to come here? Had he been the first Targaryen? "My eyes failed me years past, child. I wish the gods had spared me that, so I may look upon your face now. Some say I bear a resemblance to Queen Naerys." Daenerys had not liked that. Queen Naerys' story was so terrible. His smile turned sad. "A portrait of her hung in my father's solar. But I cannot recall it now." Gingerly, she brought his hand to her face. He tensed at first, holding it closed, and then slowly, he moved his fingers across her skin, so softly it felt like the wind. His eyes looked out into nothingness, but his face was changing, as though he were seeing things in his mind, seeing memories. He lingered a second over the scar Arya Stark's arrow had given her, pale and small on her cheek, and when he was done, he brought his hands to his and clasped them tightly together. "Your husband spoke of your beauty. I see he is not a man prone to exaggeration," he said, at last. Robb had never said such a thing to her. "You have already met?" Aemon nodded, and turned his face towards the fire. "Yesterday evening in the Lord Commander's chambers. He is an eager young man. Eager to listen and to be heard." "Yes," Dany said. She had seen that in him among his father's bannermen. He moved his head, as though trying to find her. "And he is a good husband." Daenerys paused. It was not as she imagined, being wed to a Stark. "Yes. He has been courteous since we met, and attentive to my needs." She thought of what every bride feared of her marriage. "And he's gentle." "Better that Sir Arthur heard, so he may tell Rhaegar what he wished." Matters between a husband and a wife could not be trusted to quill and parchment. Maester Aemon sighed, and a smile crossed his face once again. "It pleases me to hear that, child. My father used to say that princesses were born to be wed. But there can be love too, if hearts are young and willing." Robb Stark was the only man who would ever touch her, the only man whose children she would bear. He was her only chance at love. But Dany had not dared to dream of it. It was enough, that there was not hatred. There is peace between us. Ah, peace. As important as love, I think, but not as sweet. He searched for her hand once again, and Dany gave it willingly. How fair Prince Viserys, and the king and his children. Dany leaned closer. In Winterfell, the name Targaryen felt unwelcome. There was no space there for her to speak of them. Viserys has wed Princess Arianne Martell. I had a letter from him a fortnight past. The king remains in Riverrun with Rhaenys and her daughter, I believe, and with Queen Elia. Of Aegon, I have had little news. And Jon, the king has 3 children. You will have met Jon already perhaps. Young Jon Eamon said, quietly. Our new recruit. Yes. Sir Arthur shifted loudly in his seat, and the Maester turned his face towards the fire once more. After a pause, he spoke once more. How long do you and your lord husband intend to remain among us? They had planned on a month and a half, but it was no longer possible. That is something I wished to speak to you of. I do not mean to trouble you for your services, but I have not bled since I wed Robb Stark a month ago in Winterfell. And before that, I had my moon blood 2 weeks before, always with the crescent moon. Lady Stark had planned the wedding feast around it, so the marriage could be consummated. How had she failed to notice for so long? Her maids might have alerted her, but her and Robb were gone by then, at the start of their journey to the wall. There has been no blood since. None at all. None. When last I served in a court with noble women, I was a young man with my chain freshly forged, Maester Aemon said, softly. He squeezed her hand. I did not think a day would come when I would say these words again. I believe you are with child. You will know for certain when the crescent moon rises and your courses do not come with it. Dany realized some part of her had already known as soon as he said it. She pressed her hand against her stomach. Her clothing did not feel tighter, and it was too early to feel her child moving within her. And yet, she felt him all the same, felt as though she already knew and loved him. A son, Dany said softly, to herself. A son, perhaps, Maester Aemon repeated, smiling. Or a silver-haired daughter to bring you joy and comfort. It was why she had been wed to Robb. For Rhaegar's kingdom, and Aegon's after him. And for all of them. Forgive me, child, but the wall is not the place for you. You will require care and warmth. There is little of that here. Life could not grow here. This was a place of service and slow death. You must be careful on your return journey. It must be slow going. The babe is but a seed inside you still. He must be tended to with care and gentleness so he may grow and draw his strength from your body, the Maester explained. He must be strong, yes. Yes, he will be. He could be nothing short of strength itself. He will be, Maester Aemon repeated. Dany wanted to be alone. She wanted to undress and stand in front of a mirror and try to trace how her body was changing, see if she could see him, her little seed, perhaps already curving her stomach. Thank you, uncle, truly. It has honored me to hear these words from you. Uncle, he smiled, and once again his white eyes sought her out. Rhaul, Egg's little girl, she called me Uncle Maester when she was little. She was sent to heal wounds and broken promises too. She had a son. Lord Steffon Baratheon, who was her father's friend, she knew. And his son was Robert Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End, who was meant to marry Lyanna Stark and so hated Rhaegar for her love of him. The peace that Rhael Targaryen's marriage forged had been short-lived, in the end. Yes. He died in a shipwreck. Steffon Aemon said, as though tasting the word on his tongue for the first time in years. Yes. He sighed, all will be well, child. May the gods watch over you both. When they were once more outside, leaving Maester Aemon to his books and his memories, Sir Arthur said nothing. It was the King's Guard's way, an old habit surely, to pretend as though he had heard nothing. Daenerys thought to return to her room, but suddenly she wished to find her husband. Robb was on the wall once more. This was why they had been wed, was it not, for peace? She carried it within her now, growing in her womb, a child whose birth would wipe out all that had happened, would clean away the death and betrayal and shame and banish the ghosts that had followed them. Something else drove her too. Maester Aemon had explained that they must leave as soon as they were able. She might never come here again. She wanted to tell her son how she been to the top of the wall, and looked out across the north and all the lands he would one day rule. "Sir, will you escort me to the wall?" Sir Arthur hesitated. His cheeks were growing red in the cold, and he lifted his scarf up wrap around his face. Dany did the same. "Are you certain, your grace?" It was bitter cold, would be colder still on top. "Yes," Dany said. Robb had been brave enough to climb up the stairs. But it was the cage for her. They climbed inside, and Sir Arthur pulled on a bell rope. A few moments later and they jerked up, beginning their slow ascent with their backs to the wall. The cage swung, and Dany wrapped her hands around the iron bars, and Sir Arthur wrapped his arms around her, frowning at the disappearing ground beneath them. They inched up until they were above the towers of Castle Black. Further away was Mole's Town and some streams of water, then the mountain heights, and the bleak emptiness of wind-swept hills and rocky fields beyond. Thick voices behind them said, "It's the princess," and then the cage jerked to a stop and they hung for what felt like an eternity, swining slowly back and forth, the ropes creaking. Then grunts and the loud groaning of wood, and the cage slid sideways until the wall was beneath them. Only then did Sir Arthur let her out of his embrace, pushing the cage doors open and helping her to step out on the ice. A heavy figure in black was leaning on the winch, while a second held the cage with a gloved hand. Their faces were muffled in woolen scarves so only their eyes showed, and they were clumped with layers of wool and leather, black on black. "Thank you, Goodman," Dany said, her voice quiet under her face covering. "Your Grace," one of them said, and then turned to Sir Arthur. "The ground is slippery, sir. This is not a woman's place." "We will manage," the knight replied. "Where can we find Robb Stark?" Wordlessly, the man pointed westwards. The wind snapped around them and for a moment, or less, Dany felt a cold that was more than cold. It was like an icy breath that swept up on her, and in her heart she knew that if it caught her she would die a death that was more than death, alone forever in the darkness. Just as quickly, the feeling was gone. Dany took Sir Arthur's arm once again. The brothers spread crushed stone across the walkways, but the weight of countless footsteps would melt the wall beneath, so the ice would seem to grow around the gravel, swallowing it, until the path was bare again and it was time to crush more stone. They moved gingerly now, towards the wall that stretched out before them, a vast white road with no beginning and no end. The cold was like a knife. It was not long before she sighted her husband. He rode the grey of his house today, his cloak trimmed with white fur and a sword hanging at his side, looking out northwards. At his side it could only be Jon in all black, carrying a heavy spear tipped in iron that was taller than he was. Their wolves stood together. Sir Arthur stepped forward but Dany stilled him. Something in their manner told her that she should not disturb them, that this moment was theirs and theirs alone. Robb and Jon may not have noticed her but their wolves did, turning to look at Dany with an eerie coordination. And then their owners turned too, just as their wolves had, and 4 sets of eyes were on her. She could see now that a gleaming black war horn was slung across Jon's chest. Her husband came forward, and all she could see of him was his eyes. "Sir," he greeted the knight. "Daenerys. You should not be here. I came to find you." Robb paused. "Are you well?" Daenerys glanced at Jon. He looked so lonesome. In a few months, Robb would hold his son in his arms. And here Jon would be. Suddenly, she felt guilty. "Yes," she said, quickly. "We will take our leave. I will see you in our chambers." Her husband's eyes scanned hers. "It will be late when I return. I am awaiting the Lord Commander. We will ride to the haunted forest today." "Beyond the wall?" Dany asked, shocked. She looked out now to where the forest stood. The trees had been cut so it did not come closer than half a mile of the face of the wall. The dark trees loomed, like a second wall built parallel to the first. And before she could stop herself, she commanded her husband, "You cannot." If it angered her husband, he did not show it. "There is a grove of weirwoods, a sacred place where I would like to pray," Robb explained, gently. "We will set out with my guards. Wildlings do not come this close to the wall. I will ride out with them, if your grace would ask it of me," Sir Arthur said, at her side. And then to her husband, "Will Jon accompany you?" "No," Robb said, shortly. "He has his duties. He must assist the blacksmith." "The king's son," Daenerys thought in shock. Bastard or not, he was the blood of the dragon too. Truly? She asked, incredulous. That is the way of the Watch, your grace, Sir Arthur said. Each recruit must be set to different tasks so they may learn where their skills lie. But then she noticed her husband's eyes still on her, as clear as a lake. What is the matter, truly? There was no choice. Your son, Dany said, finding her words. His brow furrowed, and then the tension seemed to leave him, replaced instead by a look of wonder, his eyes wide. My son? He asked, softly. My son? Yes. He looked over his shoulder to where his cousin stood, and back to her. Can you feel him? Robb asked. There was a smile to his voice. No, and yes. Maester Aemon thinks we should return to Winterfell sooner than we planned. We will return. You should not be here, Daenerys. It is too dangerous. Whether he meant the wall, or Castle Black she did not know. I beg you. You must stay in the room until I can arrange for our journey. Promise me. He'd never spoken to her like this, never asked anything of her. I promise, she said. Robb, are you glad? Yes, yes. We can name him Eddard, after my father, and his voice changed, became almost one with the wind. Or Jon, for the king in the north, and for my cousin. Eddard. Jon. The names were as strange to her as this north was. She had imagined her son would be Daeron, or Jaehaerys, or Aegon or Aemon, or Rhaegar. When she'd wed Robb, she thought of Torrhen, for their alliance. She had seen the last King of Winter's crown in the Red Keep, along those of the other kings that Aegon the Conqueror had cast down. They were kept locked away, but Dany recalled when Grand Maester Marwyn took them to the lower levels of the keep to view them. Torrhen Starks was unlike the others, plain and unadorned, made of bronze and iron. His ancestor had knelt in submission, but her husband was a proud man. He might think the choice an insult. Perhaps he might prefer to recall Brandon Snow, Torrhen Stark's bastard half-brother who had offered to kill the dragons instead of swearing fealty. As you wish, Dany said. She left her husband on the wall. Within their chambers, a fresh fire was burning in the hearth. That night, Dany did not wait up for her husband. She slept, and in her dreams she was Aegon the Conqueror and armies were surrendering at her feet. But when she mounted Balerion and flew above them, she saw that they were armored all in ice. When she bathed them in dragon fire, they melted away like dew and created a torrent. When she woke with a start to the darkness, and to Robb settling into the bed beside her. Robb. Forgive me, I didn't mean to disturb you, he said. Can I send for anything for you? Are you well? I am well, she replied. In the dark, Dany could hardly see her husband's face. She closed her eyes instead, and listened to his voice. I prayed for our son, for his health and yours, he whispered. What did the gods say? The old gods hear our prayers but they do not speak. He will be strong and brave. I just know it, Dany said. Robb turned towards her and Dany replaced his hands with hers on her belly. They stayed at the wall for 3 weeks longer, long enough for Dany to miss another her moonblood for a second time and to know beyond doubt that the child was healthy within her. Their return to Winterfell, however, was more bitter than their departure. Robb's parting from Jon was hard. He turned away from him silent and brooding. When it was her turn to bid her nephew farewell, Dany was taken aback at the sadness which washed over her. She surprised them both by pulling him into an embrace and Jon had looked at her strangely after, bashful. Take care of one another, he murmured. Somewhere on the King's Road, Robb sent a rider to Last Hearth for provisions and the man returned with letters for her husband and the grim news that Benjen Stark had not returned from his ranging. He had set out 5 days after they arrived at the wall to search after the Lord of Runestone's son and was late returning. Robb rolled up the letter into a ball and threw it across their tent, his breath rising erratically in his chest. When Dany touched his shoulder, he turned to her with tears already threatening to spill from his eyes. Mormont says my uncle's lost. But it's not true, his voice loud, insistent. That night, though, as they slept, he sobbed in the dark beside her. Dany pressed her hand to his cheek, and wiped away his hot tears. And then he took her, and their love-making was almost as it had been on the first night, cautious and gentle and quiet. He held her hands in his, though, as he hadn't done then and when he found his release, he did not hide his face in shyness and shame, and a rush of possessiveness came over her. There were things he kept from her, parts of him he did not trust her with, but this, at least, no one would ever know, would never see. And she had shared that same piece of her with him too. This is the only man who will ever touch me, Dany thought, this is the only man whose children I will bear. He was her only chance at love. The mood at Winterfell was equally grave. Whatever passed between the Starks when they received word of Benjen's disappeared occurred behind closed doors, and cast a pallor over the Enter Keep. She'd overheard Arya swearing that Jon would find him, and the girl had been so sure of that, her mood seemed lighter than rest, as though the hope of it was made more tangible by the knowledge that Jon was on the wall too. Robb and Lord Stark were gone often in the first few moons of her pregnancy, and she knew it was the king beyond the wall that concerned them. For days or weeks at a time they would disappear, riding out to their bannermen. Lady Catelyn's kindness cut through it all. It was she who helped Daenerys prepare the nursery, long vacant since Rickon was old enough to sleep in a bed. It was she who advised her. And when Dany's time came, it was she who sat beside her. Her pains started at the hour of the nightingale, and it was agony from the start. When the first of them came, she tried to call out to Wyler Mandaily, but her voice came out a gasp. The girl was ever the light sleeper though, and she was on her feet quickly, calling for the maids who slept outside to send for the maester. The pain pulled her out of her body, out of her mind. Suddenly, she wanted to look out at the sea, just once more. She wanted to throw open her windows and see the black wings which covered the armory and smithy, and the walk among the gargoyles and demons and hellhounds that brooded among the walls. She wanted to smell smoke and brimstone once again. But when she tried to get up from the bed, torment seized her and pulled her back and took the breath out of her. A minute or an hour passed and the candles had been lit, the fire blazing, and Maester and the midwives were at the foot of her bed. "Your Grace. I must inspect you, forgive me." His cold hands were on her knees. "No, stop," Dany screamed. She convulsed as the pain took her. "Only Robb had touched me there," she wanted to say. Her husband's hands were always warm, and even though he might never let himself love her, his caresses had become sweet and precious to her. Between her legs was naught but agony now, and the thought of this old man's hands on her made her feel sick. She began to gag. Nothing came up at first, it merely moved the pressure she was feeling in her stomach further up, to her chest and then her throat, and then she was retching before she had the chance to throw her head over the bed, vomit staining the front of her shift. Undaunted, Wyler stepped forward and wiped Dany's mouth with a soft towel. "Let me help you," she said, softly. Somehow, Dany found the strength in her to lift her hands over her head, and like a mother undressing a child, Wyler pulled the sticky garment from her body. There was no use for modesty now. "Princess, I must examine you," Maester Lewin repeated. "Please, it is for the baby. My baby. My son." He was so near she could see him, fierce and pale, standing in a forest, surrounded by the fluttering and thousand red leaves, and the creaking and groaning of root and branch. He had Robb's eyes and auburn hair that fell wild and tangled around his face, shot through with a streak of silver. In her mind's eye, in whatever space they were shared bound by love and blood, he saw her too, swept his hair off his face and smiled. And his smile was hers, and Viserys, and Rhaegar's. Dany opened her legs. She felt the Maester's fingers inside her, a discomfort like a pinprick, and just as quickly he pulled away, and ordered one of the servants to boil water. "Is he ready to come out?" Dany heard herself asking. "No, Your Grace, it will be a while longer." A while longer was an age of waves and crests. Even in the moments of relief, all she could think of was the pain that would surely come again, and did each time worse than the last. In the beginning, she had bit it back. Now, it felt like her son was using his knife to hack his way out of her, and she screamed, not caring who heard, not caring if she woke the whole keep. Lady Catelyn arrived as the pain began to curl once again, and for the first time since Dany met her she looked disheveled, her hair pulled back loosely from her face, wearing a robe over her nightclothes. "What time is it?" part of her wondered. "How long have I been here?" Her good mother bent to speak to the Maester over Dany's open legs, and then came to sit at her bedside, displacing Wyler. "You're doing wonderfully," Catelyn said, gently pushing Dany's hair away from her forehead. Dany clutched at her arm. "Open the window, please." She indulged her, rising quickly and pulling back a tapestry and throwing open one of the high narrow windows. It was light out already. How could it already be morning? The pain took her again and again and again, and left her thrashing in the bed. Dimly, she was aware of the maester's arms on her thighs, holding her in place. A fire tore her body in two. My son will kill me, she thought, but it did not matter to her if she lived or died. He had to live though, he must. When she could breathe again, she looked at Lady Caitlin. Is Rob waiting? Is he outside? Dany breathed. If she died, she did not want her son to be alone. Yes, child. Caitlin summoned a smile, he's right outside the door, waiting to see you. She leaned close, as though to whisper, I think he's more frightened than you. Come, let us show him how brave you are. Help her up, get her up. She heard a voice, and suddenly Lady Caitlin's arms were on her shoulder, pulling her from her sleeping position, and it was her back that exploded in torment. No, she screamed, no, but no sound came from her. And she was no longer in Winterfell, no longer in the room tended to by Lady Stark and Maester Lewyn with Robb Stark a few feet beyond. She searched for her son again. And she saw him once more, waiting in the woods. He knelt before a heart tree, bigger than Winterfell's, with a mouth so large a man could sleep in it. Dany's heart turned cold with fear to see him bring a knife from his belt and slice through his palm, unflinching. Once the blood began to pool in his hand, he let it drip across the roots of the tree. This is the blood of dragons, he said, this is the blood of kings. Around him, she heard the howling of wolves and the crack of leather wings. Just as quickly, she was pulled away, pulled to the familiar darkness of Dragonstone. A woman screamed from behind a door, screams that sounded so much like her own, as a storm raged outside. And then there were babies' cries, and a woman's voice drifted through the door. Daenerys, child of storm, take her, save her. With tears on her face, Dany turned away, but in each place she sought to escape, ghosts awaited, dressed in the faded armament of kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair of silver and hair of gold and hair of platinum white, and their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. Rhaegar. Viserys. They were here, she could feel them. But when she ran to them, she only found a little boy, with pale lilac eyes, weeping in the dark. Don't cry, Dany wanted to say, but he only screamed and pushed away from her. I don't want you, I want my mother, where is my mother? His voice was a scream. It was a screech that hurt her ears and broke her heart. And then he was gone, melted away with the rest, and Dany was not on Dragonstone any longer. She was in the Red Keep's cavernous stone hall, and the skulls of dead dragons looked down from the walls. Upon the Iron Throne sat an old man in rich robes, with dark eyes and long silver-grey hair. At his feet, a man cooked in his armor and filled the room with a dreadful stench, and another, younger, choked at the end of a rope. Terror filled her. Stop, Dany screamed, and this time she heard it, knew she had said it. Nothing stopped. Neither the pain, nor the movement in the room, like flies buzzing around a corpse. Rhaegar. Help me. Why did you send me away? He came to her as though summoned, but this was not the brother she knew. He was younger, of age with Viserys. Aegon, he said to a woman nursing a newborn babe in a great wooden bed. Elia. What better name for a king? Will you make a song for him? She asked. He has a song, Rhaegar replied. He is the prince that was promised, and his is the song of ice and fire. There must be one more. The dragon has 3 heads. He looked up and his eyes met Dany's, and it seemed as if he saw her standing there in the room. The blood of the dragon must not be afraid. He went to the window seat, picked up a harp, and ran his fingers lightly over its silvery strings. Sweet sadness filled the room as they faded like the morning mist. In the place was only cold. In their place was snow. White and red and red and red. The heart tree, she thought, my son. But no. It is Ghost, Dany thought, it is the direwolf, why is he here? But when she reached a shaking hand to pet him, she saw that it was Jon. And when he looked at her his eyes were grey, and violet, and red. Push, came a command, you cannot rest now. Push. Save him. Afraid. You must not be afraid. Dany pushed and flesh tore and blood spilled and she felt for certain that she was dying. And then her ears filled a sweet sound, and Catelyn helped her move her arms and there was a weight on her chest. Her son. Red-faced, and squalling, and alive. Her eyes were tightly shut, as though he was still resisting having come into the world. When she brushed his head with her fingers, he seemed to feel her, know that it was her, and his cries quieted. Dark hair covered his scalp, interrupted by a patch of silver at the front. It felt like the skin of a peach. He felt like heaven. "I know you," Dany said to him. Maester Luwin moved, bringing himself up to hold the cord that tied her son to her still. He pressed his fingers to it for half a moment, and then a midwife came forward with 2 pieces of thin rope and tied them around it. Another stepped forward with a knife. A knife. Dany remembered what she had seen, and flinched away. "Will it hurt him?" "Neither of you will feel a thing," the Maester said kindly, and then the knife was on her and the rope tying her and her child was severed. "You must deliver the afterbirth, Your Grace." "Lady Catelyn, take the child please." She had given so much to bring him into the world, she did not wish to let him go now. Lady Catelyn seemed to sense her hesitation. "We'll be right here, I promise." She passed him over to his grandmother. "Oh," Catelyn gasped when she held him finally, laughing and crying at the same time. "Hello there," she cooed, "welcome to Winterfell, my love." The pain was not so terrible after that. It was half an hour longer before she was done with it, once and for all, and maids came forward to wipe her body with wet washcloths and dress her in a linen robe and leave her be. Lady Catelyn returned her son to her arms. "Shall I bring his father in?" she asked, smiling. His father? Yes, Robb was a father now. Dany had been a mother ever since his seed had taken root in her, but her husband was a father finally. Dany nodded. She disappeared behind the door and returned in a blink with Robb, his wolf at his side, and behind them followed Lord Stark. Her husband crossed the room quickly, and when he displaced his mother at her side, Dany could see the wonder on his face. His hand shook as he brought it forward to cup his son's face. "He's so small," he murmured, "like a man outside his own body. Dark circles stained his under eyes. He's wonderful. Do you wish to hold him?" "Yes," he said, with a shaky breath. He looked back through the open door. "Sansa brought me a blanket for him, but I don't know where I left it. We can look for it later." "Hold him, hold your son," Lady Catelyn said, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. Lord Stark came closer and for the first time, Dany saw him smile. Gingerly, Robb took their child into his arms. The baby whined but did not cry, settling into his father's embrace as easily as he had hers. Robb suddenly laughed, his hair. He mimicked her earlier motions, running a finger across his scalp. Look, look, he's opening his eyes." Dany did not have to look to know they were blue. When Robb saw, he pressed a kiss to his son's forehead. It was then that Grey Wind padded to the bed and pressed his nose to the baby's feet. "The gods have blessed us," Ned said, now at Catelyn's side. He was looking at Robb, and who could tell who he loved more in that moment, his son or his grandchild. She put a hand on her husband's knee. "What will you name him?" "Cregan," Robb said, a whisper and a command all at once. "Cregan Stark." "Hand to Aegon the Dragonborn," Dany remembered. Robb nodded, the old man of the north. King Aegon promised to reward him with a Targaryen princess, but the vow remained unfulfilled. "Until our wedding." Cregan. This is how it was meant to be, Dany thought. Notes. Hello everyone. I am really sorry for the delay in getting this update. My attention was divided between this and another fic, and then I went through some personal problems that made it really difficult for me to feel creative and to write. Writing the other fic has also made me incredibly self-critical of my writing, so it's taken me a while to feel comfortable putting myself out there again. Thank you to everyone who has stuck in there with me, and read, and QOD and commented. I am really excited to be in conversation with you all again. Things have been moving quite slowly, so I have sped up the pace here to get us where we need to be. Next up will finally be a Robb chapter. Chapter 10, Robb I. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. He dreamt of trees which clung to slopes, of sentinels and soldier pines, and the wisps of pale mist that hung thick around it all. Above him, owls watched from the trees and wind sung in the leaves, and the oaks and hills and streams seemed to open up to him in the dark. Alongside him, his brothers and sisters ran, breaking apart to chase after some prey, but there was another. He felt him far away, alone and cold. He raced to him onward, faster, north. Another scent pulled at him and he leapt back over roots and moss and dirt. Within, he padded around the empty hot springs and then stone was under his paws once again. The few men who stood awake shrank back him and none stood in his path as he climbed the stairs and pushed open the doors with his paws. And then he smelled the best thing of all, fresh snow and sea water and milk, better even than the smells and sounds of midnight. The wooden bars were wide enough that he could put his snout through and bring it close to the child's face. Silently, the baby peered at him. He wanted to take him, to pick him up gently with his mouth and show him all the world outside, run with him through the wind and rain and teach him to catch rabbits and deer, but he was too small still and near him a woman slept, a woman who smelled of the embers of a dying fire. She stirred now, and in the dark there were two sets of eyes on him, blue and violet. "You're not going to eat him, are you?" she asked, with sleep in her voice. He licked the child, earning a burst of laughter in exchange, but the woman only smiled and got up from the bed and suddenly the baby was out of reach, in her arms, and she was baring her breasts and helping him to find her nipple to suckle. In the distance he heard his brothers and sisters calling for him. Instead, he leapt up on the bed beside them and ignored the disapproving click of the woman's tongue. By morning, Rob was locked in the solar with his father and Mayor Stillowin. Ravens had arrived by dawn. The parchments were laid out in front of them, like some cursed thing no one wished to touch. "We've had word from the wall," his father said, his voice grave. "There was a fire in the Lord Commander's tower. Mormont writes that undead things attacked them in the night." Rob could almost hear the click-click-click of old Nan's needles as his father said those words. Bran loved and feared those stories the most. In the darkness, the others came for the first time, she would say. They were cold things, dead things, that hated iron and fire and the touch of the sun, and every creature with hot blood in its veins. They swept over holdfasts and cities and kingdoms, felled heroes and armies by the score, riding their pale dead horses and leading hosts of the slain. All the swords of men could not stay their advance, and even maidens and suckling babes found no pity in them. They hunted the maids through frozen forests, and fed their dead servants on the flesh of human children. "Is John hurt?" Rob asked. "Yes." Father added quickly, "Only his hand, it will heal." Words failed him. John had fought some foul thing, and lived. On the wall, Rob had shared with him Mormont's words and the reports of wights and strange creatures prowling the haunted forest, not knowing whether he should or not. A different man might have fled the wall then and there, before he took his vows, but John had only sat quietly, weighing his words. Finally, he said his father the king had read something in the scrolls years ago that warned of the end of a long summer when the cold breath of darkness would fall on the world, but he'd become convinced that it was not this age. Rob's own father had been disbelieving, concerned instead by the reports of wildlings, awaiting word each day of Benjen's return. It was easier to believe those things on the wall, but sitting by the fire in Winterfell they seemed no more frightening than the tales of monsters in the crypts. His father continued, "The bodies they found were of the rangers who set forth with Ben, only a few leagues from the wall. Mormont writes that they were pale and cold, with black hands and feet and wounds that did not bleed. John managed to burn the things. And Uncle Ben? No word." Mayor Stillowin cleared his throat. "Surely the Lord Commander is mistaken. There must be some other explanation. The Maester of Castle Black, he is wise, certainly, but he is an old man without sight. Perhaps if someone else from the Citadel confirms it. The bodies are ashes now. Sir Andrew Tarth travels now with what remains of them to King's Landing. The Grand Maester will without a doubt inspect them. Father sighed, Mormont says it is the long night, that the others have returned. They intend to ride beyond the wall to search for Benjen and learn the truth of it, one way or another. Are we to ride with them?" Rob remembered how it had felt to go beyond the wall, to know there was nothing but danger ahead. His father often said the map is not the land, but even in the safety of the Weirwood Grove, under the eyes of the gods, he had felt it still, felt that every step taken was taken in darkness. The rangers might know some of what lay past the haunted forest, but a northern army did not. How could they advance, without no safe harbor, no reinforcements once they crossed, facing nightmares and wildlings both? He did not have to think hard to remember his history. Raymond Redbeard, Baal the Bard, Jendel and Gorn, Joramun, all had invaded and been stopped at the wall. The Starks and the Night's Watch had broken them all, but now they would reckon with Mance Rayder and something far worse. If the legends were to be believed, as cold and death filled the earth, the last hero sought out the help of the children of the forest with nothing more than a sword, a horse, a dog, and a dozen companions. He lost them all and, hounded by dead men and spiders big as hounds, at last he found the children and with their help the first men of the Night's Watch banded together and won the battle for Dawn. But the children of the forest had been dead for thousands of years. There was no last hero in Winterfell, no magic nor spells. Only the might of men. But all the swords of men could not stay their advance. No. Not yet. It is arranging only and the duty of the watch. His father rubbed his forehead, weary. War is coming with the wildlings and the wall is 100 leagues long. We will need the full strength of our armies when the time comes. But Jon, he almost said. He swallowed his words. Jon was a man of the Night's Watch now. His cousin would have smiled to know Robb thought he needed rescuing, made some jape about it. And Aunt Lyanna. She had left Winterfell suddenly, when word reached them that Jon had taken his vows. It was the end of hope. By now, she was safely back in the Kingswood. What would she do when she heard? My lord, forgive me, but the others and the long night. These are half-remembered fables. I am certain it is little more than some disease perhaps spreading among the wildlings which afflicted these men. Maester Lewin eyes swept across Robb and his father. Father nodded, I believe it to be that also. All the more reason for caution. We cannot risk a plague. We will see what the Grand Maester and our Scholar King say. It will be 9 months, maybe more before Mormont returns. In the meantime, we will continue to prepare for winter as we have done. Robb had spent 2 weeks among the Glovers and another 2 after that on Bear Island. His father said that if he was to lead one of his armies, the Lords of the North must come to know him as the man they would fight beside. The Glovers agreed to strengthen and repair their defences at Deepwood Motte, and to the Mormonts Robb brought along 30 of his father's own guards to aid them. After that he'd been to the northern mountains, where the Vulls had greeted him with their coarse courtesy but seemed to test him in each word and deed. They must have been satisfied in what they found, for they accepted his gifts of axes and armor, and sent him back the hills with hardier mounts. His father had worked to shore up their defenses in another manner. He looked at him now. It is time for Sansa to wed. Your mother had hoped for more time with her, but we should delay no longer. It is best that she is settled before Carhold will join us and march, better still if she has a son of her own then. Some time in the company of Cregan and your lady wife will do her some good to show her what future awaits her. She tries, but all Sansa wishes to speak of is the princes and Southron lords. She says Harry on Karstark is uncouth. Robb cringed at the word. It was hard to have patience with her and her endless complaining. Harry on does not like music, Harry on is a poor dancer, she'd heard him call the Southron milksuck knights and worse. He remembered his own misgivings when the king wrote and began negotiations to wed him to Daenerys. But he'd had the shame at least to share them only with his mother and father. And his doubts had been of a different nature. His father frowned. Sansa acts like a child. Arya is full of anger and I have 100 lords' sons clamoring for her hand. I don't know what to do with your sisters. He leaned back in his chair. Sansa would wed Harry on Karstark in the end, despite her unhappiness. She would even smile on her wedding day. But Arya. She would kick and scream each step. Her groom was as likely to get a slap in the face as a kiss. When we leave for Carhold, you and I will journey on to Last Hearth. The Great Jon writes that wildlings are washing up on their shore, and if they are tainted by some ailment, the Umbers can scarce afford it raging among their people. I would have Bran stay here. The Karstarks will want the princess in attendance, but Cregan is young for travel and I would not part his mother from him. Bran won't like that. He'll want to come with us, especially if we are to march afterwards, Robb said. He's only a boy. If he dreams of knighthood still in a few years, there will plenty enough chances to prove his valor. Your uncle Edmure has offered to squire him in Riverrun and I intend to send him, once Cregan is older. Bran had grown close to the reeds of late, passing his days in the company of Moira and the brother old Nan dubbed Little Grandfather. A year ago, he would have gone wild at the thought of squiring for their uncle. But now, Robb suspected, he would be loath to part from his new friends. "There is more pleasant news," Maester Luwin said. He read from a parchment in front of him. "The coin the royal family sent to celebrate Cregan's birth has arrived. There is 40,000 golden dragons from the king and queen, and 20,000 each from Prince Viserys and the Prince of Dragonstone. His son was 4 months old, and already a rich man. Princess Arianne expects her first child within the half-year. We will have to send some token of celebration." Robb nodded. "I'll speak to Daenerys." "Others have written," Maester Luwin continued, "all the great lords, each of the bannermen. Prince Doran has promised Cregan the pick of the horses in his stables when he is old enough to ride, and Lord Arryn his falcons." His father's expression softened. "You may have time for another son yet, before we march." It was a sweet dream, but unlikely. War was all but a certainty. By the time it was safe for his wife to carry a child within her once more, he would be gone. Perhaps, if the gods were good, she would be in the early turns of pregnancy once more. But he might never hold that baby, as he held Credge each night now. When he left Winterfell, he might never return. What world would that child be born into? The thought of it left his throat tight and dry. He will born in Winterfell's walls, as his brother was. Winterfell will not fall, never. He laughed for the first time last night, Robb said. Grey Wind roused him and he began to laugh. He hadn't seen his wife nor his son yet this morning, yet he was as sure of it as anything. Robb tried to think of how he knew that. And a week back Daenerys said he slept through the night without waking. She says he's different, that he's not like any other children. His father smiled. "All children are unlike any other in their mother's eyes. He reminds me of Bran at that age. Do you recall? He would be quiet for days, and only make a sound when he needed to be fed or changed. I remember Rickon and his screaming better." Arya wanted to put a turnip in his mouth to stop him. Rickon had cried without ceasing for a year, it seemed like. One day, Arya had walked right into the kitchens to look for Gage, and when he'd questioned what a little lady wanted with a raw turnip, she said it wasn't for her, of course, it was for the baby. His father's smile grew at the memory. I fear your little sister is better at hiding her mischief now." They spent the rest of the morning going over account books. When at last he stepped out, Winterfell was loud with the sounds of war-making. It rang with the sawing and the crack of crofters felling trees in the Wolfswood, Mikken barking orders at stewards and servants alike, and the clangor of steel on steel in the yard. Bran awaited him there, his wooden sword in hand, while the Reeds watched from the window on the covered bridge between the armory and the great keep. His brother's footwork was too slow yet, his blows imprecise, and he had the habit of sticking his tongue out of his mouth when he was about to dodge, but getting better each day. When their practice was done, sweat ran down their faces and knocks of their necks. Afterwards, they walked to the hot springs together, their wolves circling behind them. "Will you take me with you to see Jon?" Bran asked, suddenly. Robb frowned. "I'm not going to the wall to see Jon. If we march it will be to fight wildlings and you have to stay here." "Why?" "Moira and Hojan say." "Never mind what Moira and Hojan say. You have to watch over Mother, and Arya, and Rickon, and old Nan and Hodder too. Everyone in Winterfell will be under your protection." "What about Credge?" "He's your heir. Why can't he do it?" "He's too small." "And Rickon?" "That was another matter. Recently, he'd gotten into the habit of disappearing with his wolf. Usually, Hodder was sent after him and found him in the crypts or the first keep, but a fortnight ago father had to send half the castle after him and they'd brought him back from the Wolfswood after dark. You and Rickon will do it together. Bran, if you're going to be a knight you'll have to swear to defend the weak and the innocent. Your nephew is weak and innocent. If I have to leave, you'll have to protect him and Daenerys too." There was more still that Robb wished to say to him, but sometimes he didn't know how much to tell his brother. Past the trees, he heard the sound of curses and wind cutting through the air. Bran smiled and raced ahead. "Arya." His sister stood in the clearing in front of the heart tree, her face red and her hair askew, Nymeria at her heels. "What are you doing here?" "Practicing your needlework." Bran asked, grinning. That earned him a punch on the arm. He laughed it off, which only made Arya angrier. Where's your Septa? Inside with the rest of them. They are finishing the dress for Sansa's wedding feast. And why are you not with them? She shrugged. Sansa says my stitches are ugly and I'll just spoil it. You'll miss her when she's gone, you know, Robb said. Arya scrunched up her nose, unconvinced. It'll be heaven. Do you think Septa Mordane can go live with her? He couldn't help but laugh. I don't think they'll have much use of her in Carhold. We're going to the hot springs. You should get inside before they start looking for you, or do you want to get caught again? Their mother was running out of punishments. For a week, Arya had to take her meals alone in her room, but she seemed to prefer that, and after a few days she was allowed back. She'd been sent to the Godswood to cleanse herself so many times, father had joked that he should build a camp for her there. She probably would have liked that too. Ask Dany to lie for you and say you were with the baby, Bran suggested with a smile. Arya said nothing, and scratched her wolf behind the ears. They walked on alone, leaving her to her mischief, and slipped at last into the springs. The water steamed, bubbled loudly, hot air rising through its murky green depths. Bran dipped his head beneath the water, and emerged with his hair plastered to his forehead, filled with green moss. Is Arya going away too? He asked. Robb looked at him, puzzled. Sansa said Arya has to marry a northerner too, or it's not fair. She said she should marry Benfred Tallheart, so she has to look at his thick neck every day. Robb sighed. Who else heard her say that? Jane, Beth, the Septa. I don't know who else. Arya only told me later. No, she's not going away. Not yet. Time marched on, with no word from Mormont, and when the king at last wrote to Winterfell, his letter was to Daenerys. It was Catelyn who found Robb as he searched Winterfell for his father. They were to ride to Castle Sarwyn in the morning. Even though no one said it, it was for Arya, to speak to Clea and Lord Meager and see whether a courtship could be started. Of late, Ned had begun to ask his sons about the young heir, whether he was a jovial sort of lad, if he'd ever seen Arya when she was afoot, wreaking havoc, and what he'd said if anything. Clea was easy to laugh, and gentle of manner, had always been a friend to Robb and his brothers. And Arya would be so close, a half a day's ride of less, given how quick she was on her horse. His mother stopped him as he was about to enter the Godswood, her look grim. Your father's with his gods, she said. Daenerys has had a letter from the king, her voice dropped. Aerys Targaryen is dying on Dragonstone. Her presence has been requested, along with the princes and Rhaenys. A ship will await her in White Harbor in a fortnight. Gods have mercy. The Mad King would die, and die soon, alone save for a handful of his kin, in the dungeons of the Dragonstone, stripped off his throne and his freedom. Robb had heard it said that he hadn't felt the sun on his face since the day the Great Council decreed his punishment. He'd also heard it said that demons and foul creatures and ghosts roamed those lower levels, and if a man went down far enough, he would find himself standing at the doors of the seven hells. Daenerys was born and grew into a woman in that same keep. The thought of that had disturbed him beyond measure when their match was first arranged, despite Lord Arryn's assurances that she did not have any madness or malice in her, that on his visits to Dragonstone she had been a princess in deed and word. The servants he'd paid for information said she could be stubborn and ill-tempered when vexed, and she was not as studious as she should be, but they also said she was kind, and loving with her brother and her companions. Now, Robb felt only stunned. Truly? Yes, I saw the letter myself. Your father, she sighed, he said little when I went to him, but it will rip all the old wounds anew. And not just his, I fear. They should let him die alone, Robb said, suddenly. Why must they all fly to be at his side? His mother frowned. Think. Why would a king wish to mark the passing of his predecessor? Because, Robb tried to think past the shock. He would see him die with his own eyes, and then no man might challenge his right to rule. And because no matter what sins he committed, Aerys was born a Targaryen, and the king would not have it be said that the blood of the Dragon Lords is cheap, no matter how tainted. Yes. No matter how tainted, she repeated. If you mean to ask why Daenerys will go, it is because her king has commanded it. Her mother looked at him in a way that made him feel ashamed. You must be kind. He knew. He knew. Lord Arin had said it was unclear whether Aes even knew he had a daughter. But it was strange all the same. And Daenerys. He had not found it in his heart to love her when they first met in Riverrun, though he knew she was frightened and unsure and in need of it. His heart had warmed when they wed and began to share a bed, but though he desired her he did not love her. How could he, when his brothers were the namesakes of the men her father had murdered, his aunt a walking, breathing symbol of the treachery of Targaryens? He protected and cared for her all the same, like he'd promised his gods in front of the heart tree. But he warmed all the more as her stomach began to swell with their child, and now and each day since Credge's birth, when she heard him speaking to their child with a soft voice, bathing him with all the gentleness in the world, rocking him to sleep. Robb had been similarly loved, but she had not. She only had her brother and her nurses, had never known a mother's love. But it came to her easily. Your father worries for Lyanna. He thinks now to send Arya to bring her comfort, and help her smile again. Of all of his brothers and sisters, it was Arya who most loved their aunt, and was loved by her in return. I'll go speak to Daenerys, he said. The Sawins. Your father already sent a rider. He and Grey Wind found his wife in her chambers, and not alone. Her maids had begun to prepare for her journey, open chests spilling with clothing on the floor, and Wyler daily at the center of it all, a list in hands and 100 commands. When she noticed him, she pointed to Daenerys' small solar as Maester Lewyn was emerging. Robb did not stop to speak to him. There was no sign of grief on his wife's face, though she did not bring herself to smile. Even Grey Wind seemed to sense something was amiss, pacing the room slowly. Their son lay in a small basket on a chair beside the window, awake and alert, holding a toy he'd recently grown fond of, cloth and cotton sewn together in the shape of a rabbit. Daenerys had made it for the half-year of his name-a-day, and he'd gotten into the habit of chewing on its ear as his teeth began to come in. Are you well? Robb asked. I saw the Maester on my way in. Daenerys nodded shortly, yes. He will find a wet nurse for Cregan while I am gone. She seemed to swallow hard, but gave no other indication of how it hurt her to say it. Their son squealed as though understanding. Daenerys scooped him into her arms, and kissed the top of his head where the silver patch of hair had grown into a perfect curl against the auburn tangles. For months, he had dreamt about what his son might look like. In his heart, he wished for a son with grey eyes and dark hair, a child that looked like his father and his father before him, that Bannerman and small folk alike would know to be Stark at first glance. As his son grew, he saw himself reflected in each and every inch of him, the shape of his nose, the curve of his brow. He had taken little of Daenerys and her kin, save for that bit of silver. She chewed on her lip, who will care for him when you all leave for Carhold? I know Bran loves him, but he's only a boy. And Cregan looks to me always. I can remain here, Robb said. He'd decided it as he bound up the steps. Ricard Karstark would surely find insult in that, but marrying his heir to a Stark should be enough to assuage him. It will be for the best. You're right, Bran can't do it alone. She surveyed him for a moment. Are you certain? Yes. Robb walked over and placed his hand on his son's back. He will miss you. But he'll be brave. They stood in silence, their son between them. It was he that bound them, he that had given them the beginnings of a love that they could share. Robb had no words to give about the Mad King, or the loss of a father she may or may not grieve, may or may not love. But he could at least give her comfort where he could. I would not take him with me, even if I could, she said quietly. He belongs here. Winterfell is his home. One day, he will sit in my father's seat and all these lands will be his. No, she said, more forcefully. I mean the north. I dreamt it. I dreamt of him as a Labort. I saw him as a man, older than you are now. He wore his hair long, like yours has grown. Without thinking, Robb shrugged his hair back from his face. His wife looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. He looked just like you look now, though older, and a little taller maybe. The fever dreams of a woman in pain, perhaps. But something in her tone made him think it was more. Did he wield ice? She shook her head. No, only a simple knife. He was somewhere I have yet to see. He stood in front of a heart tree and gave some of himself to your gods. He split his palm and his blood soaked its roots. What could that mean? I feared to tell you, but I'm leaving him now to your love and your care alone. Rob felt the room grow cold. It means. It was done by savages long ago, done still beyond the wall, although if the stories were true, there the wildlings gave over the blood and entrails of their enemies and kin alike. To what end, he did not know, blood magic perhaps. That was a hard thought to bear. His son looked impossibly small now, how would he come to learn such things? Rob looked at Grey Wind, who stared back with yellow eyes. It is me. How many times had he woken with the taste of raw flesh and the feel warm blood in his mouth? How many times had he stalked the wolf's wood by night and gone hunting by morn, and saw his paw prints in the mud and the scratched trees from where he'd lunged after some prey attempting an escape? If I'm a beastling, does it make him one too? I do not know. It's an old way. It's not something my father would stand in Winterfell. Nowhere in the north perhaps, he said, finally. The words did not seem to frighten her. Does it mean he will be strong? She asked. He will be strong. How not, he is a Stark. And winter is coming. Rob had never felt the truth of the words more than now. Winterfell seemed to empty quickly around him. First to leave were Daenerys and Arya 2 days later. When their boat docked at Dragonstone, Arya would travel onwards to King's Landing and to Aunt Lyanna, and return with Daenerys' party. It pleased his sister beyond measure, Rob knew, to escape Sansa's wedding, and know at the end of her journey their aunt awaited, and the freedom of being in her company. At dawn on the day of their departure, Rob went to bid farewell to his wife in her chambers. He found her leaning over the crib, and when she turned around, he could see that she was weeping. It was the first time he'd seen her cry. She had not shed a tear as she bid farewell to the king in Riverrun, nor after the disaster on the Trident, certainly not in the Godswood as they said their vows or in the dark of their chambers afterwards. She screamed and cried out as she lay bought, but those were the sounds of pain and torment. This was naught but sadness. Not for her father, but for their son. He walked across the room, and embraced his wife. She remained like that for a moment longer, silent, arms wrapped around him, hands clutched at the back of his doublet. When you return, we'll make another child, a little brother or sister for Craig, he said quietly. He will be safe, I promise. She pulled away. Her violet had turned pale, rimmed with red. And what of you? If war comes, I will fight and perhaps I'll live. The thought came to him that this might be the last time he would look at his wife. It might be the last time they were both together with the son. I think maybe I was not the husband I should have been. If there is war and if I return, we will have another chance perhaps. I should have been happier, he thought. He saw the love of his mother and father, the ways they cared for each other in ways that exceeded courtesy and duty. Even Harry on Karstark. He had looked at Sansa like he was staring at some god when he first saw her at Rob's own wedding feast over a year past. Rob had never looked at his own wife with such worship. His marriage had felt like a sin for too long, like payment for a debt owed, a debt incurred through murder and madness. Now, as he prepared to part from her, he saw how stubbornly he'd held that in his grasp. Daenerys held his gaze. You will return. I will try. He'd spoken to her of Mormont's words on the wall but naught since, save for the wildlings and the self-styled king who led them. When his father at last emerged from the Godswood, he wrote letters for Daenerys to give to the king, to ask for men and ships to protect the north. If she knew we might be fighting creatures far worse than wildlings, would she weep at our parting? If she did not, he realized miserably, it was his fault. Come, let us kiss him once more and we will walk out together. Carefully, she leaned into the crib once more and pressed the softest of kisses on Cregan's forehead. Rob did the same after her. His wife was clear-eyed as they emerged from the room, courteously bidding farewell to the maids and guards they met on their way to the stables. Arya awaited, her horse already saddled, Nymeria sniffing the ground around her Jory castle and the other guardsmen milled out from the armory, freshly sharpened swords slung over their shoulders. A light snow fell around them, and Daenerys pulled her cloak tighter around herself. Farewell. We will be back here together soon. She took his hands. Her fingers were cold in his. There was nothing more to say. Words always seemed to pass easier between them in the dark, when they lay side by side in the quiet warmth of her rooms. Instead, Rob pulled his wife close and kissed her. When they pulled away, her lips were red and her cheeks flushed. "Farewell," he repeated. "Farewell." It was an altogether different parting when his family was due for Carhold. The night before their departure, the wolves filled the castle with their howling. At first he thought it was grief for the parting of Sansa and Lady, but he remembered they had not done so when he left with Jon. It lingered too long, too loud, and he stepped outside where half of Winterfell gathered in the courtyard in front of the library tower, staring at the sky. Above them, a comet cut across the darkness, burning red and terrible, and the wolves yelped and howled and screamed at it. He found his father and stood beside him. They both looked up in silence. "What is it?" Robb asked. "It is a sign. The gods have sent it to bless Sansa on the eve of her wedding," he heard Septa Mordane say behind him. "No, it's dragons." That could only be old Nan. When Robb turned, he saw the woman across the way, holding Hodda's arm. She lifted her head and sniffed the air. "It be dragons." Notes. Hi everyone. Thank you as always for reading, subscribing and kudoing, and particularly to those of you who have been leaving comments. It's really lovely and motivating to see how people are engaging with the story. This was a tricky chapter to write. I'm not entirely happy with it, but I've been sitting on it for a week and I think I need to move forward. I was always intrigued by how Ned is described by his kids, and I think Cat, as donning the Lord's face, and increasingly we see Robb trying to do the same. I wanted to portray Robb as a young heir trying to grow into his own authority and similarly learning to do the same, and as someone who is coming into his own and all that means. In this case, I didn't want to shy away from the disengagements that inherently come with that. Robb as heir to Winterfell feels a lack of sympathy with Sansa, because he did his duty and so why can't she? Similarly, he sees no problems with Arya eventually getting married, in the same way in canon Ned reinforces that. And of course, he can disengage from Daenerys because he's in a position where his survival doesn't depend on her. Similarly, it was hard thinking realistically what an intact House Stark would do when they got those reports from the wall. In Aggo, Ned says to Cat the others are as dead as the children of the forest, gone 8,000 years. Maester Lewin will tell you they never lived at all. No living man has ever seen one. And later we have one of the most intelligent characters in the book, Tyrion, who has spoken to Mormont firsthand and been to the wall. Laugh away Alisa Thorne's warning. I think that Ned would be cautious, but doubtful. He understands the duty of the Starks, but is unconvinced and focused on the Wilderling threat, which he has clear evidence of. Here, Robb is similarly unsure, but he is starting to understand how his bond with Grey Wind is a sort of magic and suspecting there may be other forms out there. I'm really looking forward to the next chapter. It is going to be wild. Chapter 11, Daenerys 6. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Daenerys had wished for Dragonstone, tried to conjure it up in her dreams night after night, imagined returning to it with her son when he was a man old enough to understand and remember it. Blackwater Bay was rough and choppy as they crossed, and for once she did not find joy in the cracking and snapping of the sails, and the swish and creak of the ship. The island seemed somehow changed where it rose from the sea ahead of them. The wisp of smoke from the top of the mountain had ever been grey, but today it seemed to flicker black and white and yellow in turn, as though Dragonmont was slowly awakening. Arya Stark leaned over the side of the ship, smiling, and when Dragonstone began to loom larger, when the shape of the mountain became clearer and great black citadel with its gargoyles and dragon towers emerged from the fog, she called out in her excitement. Soon, the harbour opened before them. When she had left, the port was crowded, the docks teeming with sailors and fishermen, ships of all sorts lining the strands. Most beautiful of all were Lord Valerian's ships, the silver-hulled Pride of Driftmark and the three others, the one that had carried her to the mainland. Today, the island was lonely. The dockside streets she so loved were empty of the villagers and their children and the sound of their chatter. It made for a sorry sight. This is not the place I remember, she thought. It was changed as she was. When they reached the castle gates, they found them shut. Jory Castle pounded on the iron-studded wood with his first. Finally a crossbowman appeared atop the barbican, peering down. Who goes there? Jory craned his head back and cupped his hands around his mouth. Jory Castle, captain of Lord Stark's guard, and with me are Princess Daenerys Targaryen and Arya Stark. The head vanished, and the doors slowly swung open. Within, the castle was as empty as the island without. The guards were strangers to her, though the three-headed dragon emblazoned their shields. They were led by Sir Oswell Went, who stepped forward in his white armor and bowed. She had not been gone 2 years yet, but the knight was changed to her. He wore his helmet emblazoned with the black bat, and underneath it his hair was long and lined with grey, but he'd grown thin and pale. "Welcome home, your grace." He looked at Arya and her direwolf. "This is my good sister, my husband's youngest sister, Arya." He nodded his head to her. "Welcome, Lady Arya. We are distant kin. Your grandmother was my cousin. My mother's mother, Minissa, was a Went." Arya confirmed. He smiled a small smile. "Yes, that's so." He turned to Dany. "It was my understanding that Lady Arya and Lord Stark's men were to continue to King's Landing." "We have travelled long, sir, and made haste as my brother commanded. They are in need of rest and refreshment." They had travelled without rest, save for 2 nights' reprieve at White Harbour. The Northerners had no great wish to stay within these walls, not while her father still lingered, and surely not with the mood so sour, but Jory Castle himself had hinted at it on the ship. The waters were choppy and the hour had grown late. Sir Oswell's blue eyes flickered to the wolf. "I had thought all the wolves were white." "Only John's. His wolf's name is Ghost, mine's Nymeria. Do you know my cousin?" The knight smiled again. Arya could make friends everywhere. He shook his head. "I saw him only but once as a man. My post was ever here." Nymeria was left to the yard, and with cuts of meat roamed the kennel master, while Dany and Arya made for the tower. My heart should be happier, Daenerys thought. She would see her brothers soon, be in Rhaenys company once more, and meet her nephew for the first time since they were little more than children. But she thought only of her son, hundreds of leagues away. This deep into the evening, he would have been at her breast, eyes already closing. Robb would come to her rooms, after he had completed the business of the day, and he would sit with Cregan for as long as he could, before the baby fell asleep. Even afterwards, he remained sometimes, watching the rise and fall of their son's little chest, the quiet sounds he made as he dreamt. "Will we see the painted table later?" Arya asked, as they climbed the narrow steps. In her childhood, there had been guards posted at each and every door. Today, it felt as though they were the only people in the castle. She had ever found beauty in Dragonstone. Tonight, it was dim and eerie. The torchlights seemed to cast a strange light on the ground before her, and each step felt as though they were prodding through dark emptiness. The stillness grated on her. "Tomorrow, I think, before you leave. Are you not tired?" "Tired from what?" "We've been sitting on a boat for weeks. I want to see the painted table, and the September where Aegon the Conqueror prayed, and the Windwyam." The adventure left Arya breathless. "I want to see the dragons." Dany smiled. "Did you not see them as we walked?" The curtain walls were full of them, wyverns and basilisks, and cockatrices and every sort of monster. The greatest of all were the dragons that decorated the stone drum above them. On some days, when the light was right, they all cast such a shadow that they seemed like black creatures, roaming the grounds of the keep. "Hardly. It's so dark," Arya complained. This place might have frightened other people, but Robb's little sister walked ahead, as though it were her place too, as though she could easily pluck one such beast from the walls and tame it. They crossed the gallery, passing through the middle and inner walls. She glimpsed through the tall arched windows and saw the outer bailey, the curtain wall, and the fishing village beyond. All empty save for guardsmen that strode the wall walks, peering up between the gargoyles. The rooms they were given were large, but sparse. Within, a maid unfamiliar to her awaited. As they underdressed and bathed, Arya spoke of 100 things she had learned of Dragonstone, of the dreams of Daenerys and her family's flight from Old Valyria, of Aegon the Conqueror sailing out, of his 2 sisters, and whether we could see the rooms they kept, and what happened to Dark Sister anyway. In Winterfell, she was ever measured up against her sister. Alone, Dany could see her cleverness. They ate but little, and even Arya's excitement was no match for exhaustion. Deep they sunk into the feather bed, and into sleep. Her head full with her good sister's tales, Dany dreamt a dragon dream. She searched for sun in it, hoping for a glimpse, a sound, but there was only her and the dragon. Its scales were black as night, wet and slick with blood. Her blood, Dany sensed. Its eyes were pools of molten magma, and when it opened its mouth, the flame came roaring out in a hot jet. She could hear it singing to her. She opened her arms to the fire, embraced it, let it swallow her whole, let it cleanse her and temper her and scour her clean. She could feel her flesh sear and blacken and slough away, could feel her blood boil and turn to steam, and yet there was no pain. She felt strong and new and fierce. She awoke to a quiet voice whispering in her ear. "Your Grace, wake up, it's time." Clumsily, she blinked and saw the maid's face. It was the deepest darkness outside still, and Arya slept soundly beside her. "Is my father dead?" The maid's face betrayed nothing. "His Grace the King has summoned you." Half asleep, Dany rose and scrambled and let the maid dress her once more, with on the candle light for a guide. Their chests had been brought in as they slept, but they sat unopened. Able hands twisted her hair into braids and placed a circlet on her head, and laced her in new gown of black silk and Mirish lace, with red satin lining. She was as a bride once more, a maiden cloak with the three-headed dragon once again wrapped around her shoulders. She remembered that her husband's hands did not shake as he removed it, nor as he clad her with the cloak of his house. But he had not taken any joy in it either. He had left her with the dream of something more. They would watch their son grow together and it would be different, as he said it would. They would speak of more than their son and Winterfell's accounts. When they dined among his family, he would smile at her like he did when they abed, and feed her from his plate as he had on their wedding feast. They would bathe together in the hot springs he loved, and she would take him inside her once more and they would feel the wind and the sun on their skins as they moved together. Her heart was so full of their son, she had not thought of other children yet, but she would give him more too, once the time was right. And perhaps if they looked like him, as Cregan did, it would make his joy in her all the keener. Those dreams were for another time. They had no place here. Out in the hallway, Sir Oswell stood. "His Grace awaits us upstairs." They ascended the endless steps to the great round room. A light filtered through, not the yellow of torchlights but a red, as though it were the sunset and not the deep of the night. Once they were in the chambers and its walls of bare black stone and four tall narrow windows that looked out to the 4 points of the compass. Dany saw it finally. A comet, stretching out like some great sword of fire. The sky, Dany realized. It was red. In the center of the chamber was the great table, a massive slab of carved wood fashioned at the command of Aegon Targaryen in the days before the conquest. The painted table was more than 50 feet long, perhaps half that wide at its widest point, but less than 4 feet across at its narrowest. On its surface, darkened by near 300 years of varnish, were painted the 7 kingdoms as they had been in Aegon's day, rivers and mountains, castles and cities, lakes and forests. There was a single chair in the room, positioned in the precise place that Dragonstone occupied off the coast of Westeros, and raised up to give a good view of the tabletop. Seated in the chair was Rhaegar, crowned and dressed in finery as though it were his coronation once more. At his side stood Aegon. Her nephew had grown into a handsome man, tall and slender in a way that reminded Daenerys suddenly of Jon. His silver gold hair was long and braided down his back and his eyes were Rhaegar's indigo, rimmed with eyelashes longer and fuller than her own. His upper lip was scarred, as though he had been cut and been sewn up in the dark, and somehow it suited him, this one imperfection that rendered his beauty all the more perfect in comparison. Like his bastard brother, he wore all black, save for red trimmings and a circlet of red rubies. He had a mouth for smiles, for laughter, she could almost remember the sound of it now, like far drifting into a quiet room. On visits to King's Landing when she was young, at times they would share a bed in the nursery. She remembered little of those times, save only for childish chatter and for his giggles. Tonight, his face was solemn. Rhaenys seemed similarly quiet. Her niece was unchanged from when they met last in Riverrun, wearing a gown similar to Dany's own, though underneath the long sleeves she was picking at her nails. Viserys was further off, looking outside the eastern window. Dany bowed to the king and his heir. "Your Grace," Dany said, on her knees. A glimmer of a smile passed over Aegon's face, but Rhaegar did not move. "I am sorry you have woken so early and journeyed so far on my account," Rhaegar said. His voice was hoarse. "It grieves me that we meet under such circumstances. But perhaps we will have cause for celebration soon." That was queer. Roriga nodded, and Dany rose and took her place at Viserys' side. Her brother smiled but a little, and to her surprise squeezed her hand in a way he had not done since they were children. There were 100 questions on her tongue, all the more so when she heard the door close and watched Sir Arthur, Dorne hanging his side, and Sir Oswell take their places at its side. Under the helms, she saw little of their faces. "I had hoped to see you all and your children in King's Landing one day soon," the king went on. "But a great duty has called us sooner than even I expected. Tonight, together, we will do what my great-grandfather and many of those who came before them could not do." His eyes flickered to the window and fixed on the comet. "We will birth dragons." Viserys stiffened, but somehow, some part of her had known something dark would be worked tonight. The way the castle had been emptied as never before, the strange welcome she received when Sir Oswell saw the Northerners had come on the island. It was a dance, bringing her to the tower, ensuring she spoke to nobody, saw nothing, until she stood here, and heard it from Roriga's own lips. Aegon and Rhaenys already knew. Their reaction was not shock, but something far too veiled for her to understand. "Dragons," Viserys breathed. "The dragons are dead. 4 stand before you now, and 3 lie sleeping in their eggs, awaiting us above," Roriga replied. "It is written in prophecy. The prince that was promised will be born amidst salt and smoke, beneath a bleeding star, to defeat the gathering darkness and birth the great summer." Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of it in old Valyria, and Aegon the Conqueror understood that only a united Westeros could defeat the coming evil. "I had ever know it was my Aegon, but the dragon must have 3 heads. Elia," he paused. "And Lady Lyanna. We have a son, not a daughter, and my realm has bled keenly for that." He stepped down from the chair, and placed his hands on the table. "Your births brought me joy, but they did not wake the dragons from stone. I convinced myself that I was mistaken, that the prince belonged to another time, but I have had a letter in Jon's own hand of dead man attacking them in the night. A fortnight passed, one of his men brought the remnants of a creature of evil and ice to King's Landing. Its dead hand writhed even as we burned it. The prince that was promised," Dany remembered. Jon had mentioned it as they journeyed to the wall, but she had given it too little thought. It was why her mother and father had been wed. The fruits of their marriage all stood here, save for Jon and for the babies, in Winterfell and Riverrun and the one growing in Princess Arianne's belly. Viserys was astonished. "A dead hand? What are we speaking of?" "The long night. It came before, 8,000 years ago, and it comes now." Roriga looked out across the table, his eyes lingering on the grey paint which marked the north. There was a part of Rob's heart which suspected it too, and her husband was not a man who easily believed tall tales. "The Starks are preparing for war." Mormont spoke to Rob of dead things rising on the wall, and wildlings too, and the north will march, Dany confirmed. "If they leave Winterfell now, they will be marching to their deaths," Aegon said, quietly. Her nephew ran his graceful fingers along the edges of the table. Their eyes met, and he sought to measure her reaction. Viserys scoffed, "Forgive me, but if what you say is true, then why are we here? If we are all doomed, then let us take what pleasures we can now." "I had not thought you so weak," Brother Roriga frowned. There was no anger to his voice, but Viserys almost flinched at the word all the same. "Lord Stark will do what he will. He wants my swords, but he has ever resisted my counsel. And we will do what we must." At last, Rhaenys spoke. "What is it we must do?" she asked. "How many Targaryens have sought to do what you seek to do tonight, and each time ended in doom and disaster? 9 mags could not hatch Aegon the Dragonborn's eggs. Baelor the Blessed prayed over his for half a year to no avail, and Aerion bright flame died screaming and burning from within. Wish as we want, the dragons are gone." Rhaenys looked around the room, entreating reason from them all. "If what you say is true and the threat is real, why not call a council? It was not for nothing that my mother has worked to bind us to the houses of Westeros. Summon a council, tell the lords what you suspect, and Stark, Tully, Martell and Tyrell will all march with you." There was a resignation to it. Rhaenys spoke with heat, and yet, it felt like one last desperate argument out of many. Dany and Viserys had been late arriving to it. Rhaenys' words met only silence. She turned to her brother now. "Aegon, please, you cannot believe this will work." He faltered, and for a moment resembled the boy Dany had known. "I wish there was a different way. But if you had seen the hand, Ra." What can steel do against the undead? Its body hacked into pieces and burned, the hand still moved. Don't deny you have dreamed of it, too. Out of all of us, it was you who most loved your egg and prayed for it to hatch. Prayers and dreams are different from magic or fire or whatever you seek to do here, Rhaenys replied. I have brought the egg and given it to Sir Arthur, as father asked me. You can do with it as you wish, but I want no part in this. Aegon, if mother knew. 3 dragons for his 3 children. Viserys understood quickly, but had wisdom enough to only whisper it. Even his bastard? He asked, incredulous. Rhaegar, ever indulgent with his daughter, lost his patience quickly tonight. I thought you understood best what duty meant. This is not a matter of choice. Rhaenys' eyes darted to where Sir Arthur and Sir Oswell stood, fully armored, at the door of the chamber, their faces still as water. None but them wielded weapons. This is not a matter of choice. There are only 3. Viserys complained, raising his voice once more. There are 5 of us. If they hatch, who will claim them? You are welcome to mine, viz. I am sick unto death of dragons and the things men will do for them, Rhaenys said. The dragon has 3 heads, the king spoke over them all. Aegon cannot do it alone. Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters, they were as fingers form a fist. What matters is the blood. It will be my son's choice. Did her nephew truly believe it? His face was a mask once more, betraying nothing. Rhaegar's eyes drifted once more to the comet outside, like a moth to a flame. Waking dragons requires a great sacrifice, and the most precious sacrifice of all is king's blood. Aerys Targaryen lies above us. We will give him to the flame, and through his death we will give true meaning to our house words once more. It was no lie then. Aerys Targaryen lay dead. The thought left her feeling only weary. The man was nothing to her, she told herself. He was no true father, no true king. But all the same, she was an orphan now. What of Summerhall? Rhaenys asked. Finally, at last, Rhaegar seemed affected. His face seemed strangely empty of expression. Who knows best what befell those at Summerhall than you, father? At the end of the night who of us will still be standing? The shade of Summerhall seemed to enter the room with them, now. It was there the Targaryen line was nearly extinguished, and there the place Rhaegar loved most. He still went, from time to time, as he had when he was a prince. The tales of how he slept in the ruined hall, beneath the moon and stars, with none to attend him had reached even Dragonstone. But her brother had not brought any songs back, not for years. My great-grandfather had the wrong of it. He was a father speaking to his daughter now, not a king to his subject, helping her to understand a difficult lesson. In Summerhall, they worked sorcery and fire both, but there was no blood. Blood is what is needed. The comet screams our need, Rhaenys. Why else would it blaze above us on tonight of all nights? Why would it return to Dragonstone so many years after your brother's conception, when the cold winds are rising? The comet was blood-red, fire-red, the dragon's tail. If it was a sign, it could not be clearer. And there was sorcery writ in these very stones, was there not, used to shape these towers and arches and their guardians? She found her thoughts returning to the wall, as the tongue returns to a space left by a missing tooth. If it fell, all those men would fall with it, Jon merely one of hundreds. And Robb. And Winterfell, and her son within. If there was anyone who could do what needed to be done, it was Rhaegar. I would like to help. Only, I do not know what I can do, Dany said. For the first time tonight, her brother smiled. Me too, Viserys added. Rhaenys sucked in her breath. Dragons would change everything, Ra. We will answer to nobody once more. We've betrayed her, Dany thought. Rhaenys' look was full of pain. All I need is your presence, Rhaegar said. Come. What choice did they have then? They had a king's command and a wish, a dream, that all of them had nursed, each in their own way. And a need. They left the chamber and with footsteps heavy as lead, rose up a level further to the roof of the stone drum itself. 3 massive stone dragons guarded it, ever looking outwards across Blackwater Bay, like the 79 sentinels frozen evermore, and between them flew the Targaryen banners. The world seemed small from here, the sea a still black expanse. And the comet so close, it was almost as though Dany could reach up and touch it. More men awaited them here. A pallid man dressed in striped black and scarlet robes trimmed with sable bowed to them, at his back 4 more dressed similarly, with bows slung over their backs. They were all strangers to her, but a look of recognition passed between Rhaenys and Aegon at the sight of them. Aegon seemed to draw closer to his sister, like a cat slinking backwards. They had built a platform of hewn logs, piled with treasures, jewels and gold, set into circlets and the pommels of swords, and fine clothing of velvet and silk, embroidered everywhere with 3-headed dragon. Dany saw glimpses of them beneath layers of brush and branches smothered with leaves and twigs. Atop it all lay a man, resting on cushions and silks, dressed in robe of thick velvet with red fastenings and fur collars, the sleeves heavy with golden scrollwork. She did not want to, but she made herself look. Aerys Targaryen was clean-shaven with short white hair, and a crown atop of his head. His face was lined and his eyes closed, but Dany saw her brothers in his strong jaw, and herself in his mouth, slightly open as though he were only sleeping. In his hands, 3 eggs were nested, the one she knew to be Rhaenys and the others which must have given to Jon and Aegon. With those hands, Aerys had removed the maiden cloak from her mother's shoulders. He had cradled Rhaegar and Viserys both. Perhaps her, though no had ever told her if he had. The thought made her stomach twist. Viserys grew pale beside her. "That's him," he said, to no one in particular. None seemed to hear him. Oil Rhaegar commanded, and Sir Arthur brought forth the jars and poured them over the pyre, soaking it all, until it trickled from beneath the logs. He went on. "We are the blood of the dragon, each of us. We do this together." Sir Oswell stepped forward and handed each of them an unlit torch in turn. "That's all?" Rhaenys asked, cautiously. "A dead king, flame, and dragon eggs, watched by the comet in this place of salt and smoke. That is all." Rhaegar was the first to light and cast his into the pyre, his eyes as cold as stone as he did so. He did not look away as it began to lick at the lower levels, though Dany heard him mutter words under his breath. Viserys came afterwards, shaking, and turned away as soon as he did so, wiping his hands on the front of his doublet as though to render his deed undone. There was silence afterwards, nothing but the quiet crack of wood. A look passed between Rhaenys and Aegon, but neither spoke. The king was not patient tonight. "Aegon," he commanded, in a voice like ice, and the Prince of Dragonstone stepped forward slowly, and added his torch to the growing fire. Her nephew sprung back as though stung, and for one horrible moment Dany thought he might have caught his cloak on fire. But no, his face was only twisted in horror. "He's alive," he murmured. And then louder, "He lives still." Rising heat puffed at her face and the wood crackled, louder and louder. The flames whirled and writhed, racing each other up the platform. "Look," Dany commanded herself, "look." There was something, perhaps, a movement to his chest she had not seen before. "It can't be, but it is, it is." For a long moment, Rhaegar did not speak. "Yes," he said finally. "He hangs on to life stubbornly. It will be but a day or 2, no more, but we cannot wait." And then Viserys was retching at her feet. The king frowned at the sight. "He has been given enough milk of the poppy that he will feel no pain. I was not sure this was the way, but the comet. It must be tonight." Each word pained him, but not enough to stop. "If we do this, we curse ourselves forever," Aegon said, quietly. "If we do not, we curse the rest of the world with us," the king replied. "The North will be the first to fall. If Ned Stark fights the White Walkers, he and his son and his men will perish and return to Winterfell as whites to root out everything living. The Vale will wither afterwards, and the Riverlands, and the Westerlands and King's Landing after them, and with each village and each castle that is overrun, the march of the dead will grow. When they come at last to the Reach and Dawn, the armies of man will be as a pebble damming the sea. But the price was high and the stain of kinslaying could not be wiped clean." "Father, please." Rhaenys stepped back, pulling Aegon with her by the sleeve. The smoke grew thicker now, and Aegon was coughing. The king ignored her. "Daenerys. I will not, I cannot." How many times had she obeyed? Wedding Robb Stark, giving him a son, smothering her loneliness. Even when Rhaegar wrote and ordered her here, she had not entreated him, though parting from her son had left her breasts heavy with unspent milk, sore in a way that was beyond pain. But this. Her king sighed, and all the weariness of the world seemed to be within him. And suddenly, Oswell Went was at her side and Arthur Dane at Rhaenys, and the knights of Rhaegar's Kingsguard dragged the princesses forward. Dany felt like nothing more than a doll in his arms, and when they stood close enough to the pyre for her to see how the flames had reached her father, Sir Oswell lit the torch and pressed it into her hands. "Drop it, princess," he said, quietly, almost kindly. But what kindness was there in this deed? If only you knew his sins. All you must do is drop it. Rhaegar's voice came from behind them. There is no time. Do it now. A sharp pain burst through her wrists and she obeyed once more. Gods forgive me, I have done it. When she stepped back, the pyre seemed blurred as though she were seeing it through a veil of tears, and the flames were all around him. His clothing took fire, and for an instant the Mad King was clad in wisps of floating red and tendrils of curling smoke, grey and greasy. Rhaenys turned inwards on herself, her eyes watching the fire but not truly seeing the flame. There was a focused, frantic look to Aegon, like a boy trying to work out a riddle, the answer to it slipping away, and Viserys had begun to weep silently. They waited, whether for a moment or a lifetime. The dusk shimmered as the air itself seemed to liquefy from the heat. Dany heard logs spit and crack. And a sound came from the men who was her father, a gasp and an exhale of breath as though everything he was and had been left him, swirling in the cold air around them. The fierce hungry light that burned him turned black and grey, and no one dared speak. "It is time," Rhaegar said, in a voice cold and sharp as steel. The strangers went about their work. They opened a small wooden box, from them took 3 clay jars. One was shaped as an apple, the other a pear, the third small as an apricot. They handled them gingerly, and walked about the stone drum, laying them at the feet of each of the stone dragons. Small chutes had been dug into the stone ground, no more than an inch wide and deep, which seemed to lead underneath the pyre itself. "Your graces, once it takes, the substance will burn fiercely until it is no more. It will seep into cloth, wood, leather, even steel, so they take fire as well. Please be careful, be very careful, and do not step close to the flame," the man explained. "Father," Aegon's voice came over the crackling of the wood. But it was too late. The men stepped back, pulled back their bows, and arrows went whizzing through the night, finding their mark easily. For a moment, nothing happened, and then something began to ooze from the jars, began to crawl its way down the chutes, and the hungry light that burned her father turned black and green, and shimmered through the chill air. The fire went up and backwards, lighting the pyre and sending flames through the chutes it had traveled down, until even the stone dragons seemed consumed by the green flames. Wildfire. Dany felt the sweat bead on her neck and the heat kissing her face, and she wished she had no past and no future and no brother to obey and father to kill. This was no true sacrifice, Daenerys thought, numbly. It was the death of a man unloved, whom none would mourn, and it had made murderers of them all. "Where are the dragons?" Viserys asked her, bringing his arm up to wipe the sweat off his brow. "There won't be any," Rhaenys replied, eyes red. But Rhaegar only watched the flames. The rest of it he commanded, and the pyromancer and his acolytes stepped forward, and brought out 3 more jars from their sandbeds, laid them at 3 more chutes and set them aflame. The fire grew, as more and more green flames leapt into the sky and whirled around each other, like some deadly dance. The heat grew, but it was not the heat of dragons. The pyre began to crumble, and nothing rose in its place. The fire fluttered in the wind like 100 hungry birds, and in an instant, the Targaryen banner was aflame. They all shrank back as it whipped green black and forth in the wind for an eternal moment, and when the fire began to eat at the wooden pole that carried it, it fell almost at their feet, slicing the roof in half. Dany thought she was dead, that the red and green flames had taken them all. The screams told her otherwise. 3 of the pyromancers lay on the wrong side of it. She saw as they were engulfed, watched as they struggled in vain to put out the fire, spreading up their cloaks, rising rapidly like 100 bites, heard them beg for mercy and for death. No, it was Rhaegar. "Wait, wait. Grab them." She heard Sir Arthur yell, and for a moment she thought dragons, but no. Rhaenys was right. Someone roughly took her by the back of her gown and dragged her down the stairs. She fell, felt the bite of the stone on her face, tasted her own blood at her lips. Her left arm hurt like blazes where it had twisted underneath her. "Get up," she pleaded with herself, "up." And a hand was on her arm, pulling her to her feet, and they were plunging down the stairs, blind with panic. The knights of the King's Guard seemed to drag Roriga with them, while the rest followed. A few levels down, a great beast came with dark golden eyes, flying past, and it was as though one of the gargoyles from the walls had come alive, finally, and was racing up to dance with the flames. Even Sir Arthur did not have time to sheath his sword before it was gone, up the stairs, into the abyss. Ariadne cried. She had forgotten. How could she have forgotten? Arya was here, still. She grabbed Viserys' sleeve. Arya, she repeated. I have to go back. Her brother pulled away from her and she realized, he meant to leave her if she persisted. It flashed across his face, a look that said sorry, and he tugged himself free and careened down the stairs. Wait. Her voice sounded so small. But Rhaenys turned, and Aegon after her, and climbed up even as her brothers and the knights disappeared down the stairs. Arya Stark, Dany said again. Their crowns had fallen off, she realized suddenly. Hers too. They were wrecks. Quickly Rhaenys said, and they were up once more, 2 levels where they saw nothing, no flames, but heard them all the same, descending ever closer, crashes and wind and the groans of the cracking and splitting of wood. Her wolf was throwing herself at the door, snarling and yelping. They'd locked her in, to keep her away from what was happening upstairs, the miracle Roriga had thought to bring to the world. Aegon was quickest to act, adding his force to the wolf's, kicking at the handle with his foot, once, twice, 3 times until the wood around the lock shattered. Within, Arya held a skinny sword in her hand. Her eyes widened at the sight of them, and she slowly dropped it to her side. I tried to get out. There was a fierce look to her. What's happening? Above them, the fire roared like some great beast, drowning out the fainter sounds of screaming. You must run, Rhaenys shouted. Arya looked up the stairs. The heat smoldered around them all, and the first tendrils of smoke had begun to creep down the stairs. Run and don't stop when you get to the bottom of the tower. Go to the water, Aegon commanded. He looked at them all in turn. Run. Don't stop, no matter what. The girl understood quickly, and tightened her grip on the sword. The stone drum gave a sudden groan, so loud that they all stopped abruptly. Stone cracked and split, and a fresh air rushed in, as though some part of the tower had fallen away. Down again they went, the wolf beside them. And there was another sound added to the cacophony, a song she had dreamed of. What has happened is past, she thought, and something else is on its way. At the top of the staircase, Dany looked back. Her lips parted and she found herself holding her breath. We're going the wrong way, she thought. Terror lurked above, their murder and sin. It had twisted them all inside out. But by the roots of her hair, the truth of it and the horror held her, looking upwards to the place where it awaited. How long ago had she sensed the truth of it? She had seen those eyes in the dragonment, dreamt of those sounds. Ever they followed her. It called to them now, but they were too frightened to listen. Fire cannot burn a dragon. A dragon was air and fire. Living flesh, not dead stone. Living fresh, not a creature of fear. The dragon was never afraid. Up and up she went, past the flames that licked down the walls like long green tongues, past red, and yellow and orange, back to the top of the where the flame reached up to pet the belly of the night. Behind her and beneath her and before her lay the huge orange and green gouts of fire, unfurling and hissing and cracking. The heat beat at her back with great red wings, and even as it drove her feet faster, onwards, she felt she was walking towards a greater flame, saw smoke and fire rising from the walls ahead and floating away into the dark like so many newborn fireflies. Upon the roof, the air itself was a conflagration. Beautiful flames writhed among the 3 stone dragons, whirling and shining and spinning their yellow and orange and crimson and green shades, fearsome to behold, yet lovely, so lovely, alive with heat. The pyre burned still, a dim flame, collapsing in on itself like the world around her. There was nothing of her father left. There was a thing in her that he reached even now, even in ashes, even in flames. Farewell, she thought, forgive me. But the shade of her father looked at her, his skin sliding off his body, ashes falling from his mouth, and he wept flame. Dany could feel the heat of the stone on the soles of her feet. Sweat ran down her thighs and between her breasts and in rivulets over her cheeks, where tears had run before. Voices shouted behind, beneath her, around her, but it did not matter anymore, only the fire mattered. She was the blood of the dragon, and the fire was in her. The flames were sorcerers, robed in yellow and orange and scarlet, swirling long smoky cloaks, and in them she saw crimson firelions and great yellow serpents and unicorns made of pale blue flame. She saw fish and foxes and monsters, wolves and bright birds and flowering trees, each more beautiful than the last. And eyes, 6 eyes, limned in smoke, a nimbus of blue flame, molten. For an instant, she glimpsed a man before her, broad-shouldered and powerful, with purple eyes and a crown of square rubies. He held a sword, and when he unsheathed it, revealing the blade which lay within, the air hissed around steel and man both. And then she heard the world crack in two, the sound of shattering stone all around her. The statue collapsed, like the shaking off of a great dust, and she was showered with ash and embers, with sharp black rocks that slid down at her. And then a head turned, smoke rising between teeth that had been black stone, now as long as swords. And there came a second crack, loud and sharp as thunder, and the smoke stirred and whirled around her. And in the middle of it all, a woman's voice that was as familiar to her as her own, as sweet as mother's milk. "No, my child, do not fear. The fire is yours. You are Daenerys Stormborn, daughter of dragons, bride of dragons, mother of dragons, don't you see? Don't you see?" Unafraid, Dany stepped forward into the firestorm, calling to them. The third crack was as loud and sharp as the breaking of the world. As Daenerys Targaryen stumbled forward into the furnace wind that engulfed her, the dragons hissed around her, black and bronze and silver, pale smoke venting from their mouth and nostrils. The largest of them stretched its long scaled neck towards her. In the smoldering red pits of its eyes, she saw her own reflection, saw that she was naked, covered with soot, her beautiful hair all crisped away, her left arm bent strangely, and blood dripping from her face, milk running down her chest and to the ground where it mixed with flame and blood and stone both, yet she was unhurt. Dany reached out and put her right hand on the black scales. They were warm, alive. The tower began to collapse and come down beneath her. Now, she thought. It was this, or death. No, it was death, or death. "It's me," she said, "don't you know me?" They'd watched her for years, seen her born and grow and leave and return. She vaulted onto its back, screaming out as a pop came from her shoulder. The dragon twisted under her, its muscles rippling as it gathered its strength, and with her right hand she clutched at its scales for purchase. The black wings beat the air, sending up a choking firestorm, followed by the others, and suddenly the tower was falling away from them, folding in on itself, a terrible wave of flame and stone. Beneath her, she glimpsed Dragonstone, growing small, saw men with torches spilling from its doors, heard a wolf howling, and then they were up, flying above the dragonment, mingling with its steam and the smoke rising from its peak. Their voices grew to a roar, and for the first time in hundreds of years, the world came alive with the music of dragons. Notes. Thank you as always for everyone who has been reading this story, kudoing, bookmarking, and of course everyone who comments. It's been so lovely engaging with all of you, and I am really appreciative that you continue to read my work, and take the time to leave me a comment and chat with me. It's incredibly motivating. This is the chapter I had in mind since I first started the story. It feels very strange to finally have it out there in the world. I could probably spend another year working on it. Some of the descriptions, as you might have noticed, are borrowed from the books because no one describes fire quite like GRM. I am really torn between explaining some of the decisions I made here, or just letting everyone read and coming to their own conclusions. I think I will just address a few things, and would love to chat with anyone in the comments about it. The first is that Rhaenys is resistant here not because she's more less magical or less special than Dany, but because she out of everyone there understands best what Rhaegar risked for prophecy. She was older, is close to her mother, understands more deeply as a woman what it means for your husband to do what Rhaegar did and endanger you / your children, whereas Viserys and Dany both sort of buy into the party line of, Rhaegar must have been unhappy with Elia to go after Lyanna, and they justify that because they idolize him. And Rhaenys is completely right. It is a drastic decision, it's foolish and driven by desperation, and it does risk everyone's lives when there were other options to explore first. She will continue to play a big role in the story going forward, and it's not as a foil for Dany, or someone who's inferior to her, but someone with her own part to play in what is coming. The second is Arya. I think here, her treatment shows Rhaegar's singular focus. He truly believed the eggs would hatch, and had Dragonstone emptied so, A. no one could know they were murdering his father, and, B. so he could have time to spin the birth of the dragons in a way that was politically and prophetically effective before people saw them. I imagine a very dramatic entrance to King's Landing was planned, with the Targs all decked out, and Aegon holding the 3 babies. It's why when the Northerners come they are not exactly welcomed but not sent away either, which might arouse suspicion. They are pushed aside, and Arya is literally locked away, in this case, likely because they know she's a little rascal after what happened on the Neck, which Arthur was present for, and they don't need anyone causing problems. Arya has lacked agency in this story so far, and has been really constrained in her actions, but it will become relevant and significant later on the things she, and Jory and the other guards, saw or did not see on Dragonstone. Finally, I feel I need to address the decision to give Dany fully grown dragons that rose from the literal stone of Dragonstone, and in the process, cause a lot of damage to say the least, as opposed to the eggs. I'm happy to chat about this more in the comments, but this was the decision I felt most concerned about in terms of the reactions it would get. I believe that if she had baby dragons in this story, Rhaegar would yank them fairly quickly. Those struggles would be interesting to explore, but even if he became convinced she was the PTWP, I think it would be a paternalistic, to say the least, relationship where she would have no true power over the dragons. I think it also mirrors where Dany is at this stage in her life. She's not who she is in canon, she's married, has a son, and is nursing these desires for real intimacy and love, and where the Targ dynasty is as well, not in exile but on the Iron Throne. The dragons change that for her, and serve as a foil of humanly motherhood, and love and marriage. I think it also raises the question, perhaps unanswerable, of what magic was at work here. Was it Rhaegar's, which was singularly focused on the eggs? Or Dany's, which was completely improvised and accidental and resulted in something more monumental? Or both? Phew, okay, these notes are almost as long as the chapter itself. I'm really nervous to post this and really hope you all enjoy it. Next up will be a non-Dany POV. Chapter 12, Bran I/Daenerys 7. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Bran. Robb was seated in father's high seat today, wearing ringmail and boiled leather and the stern face of Robb the Lord. He wore that face often now. He'd grown his hair long after he was married until it fell far past his shoulders, but it had been cut in mourning and it made him look all the more stern. Hollis Mollin stood behind him and a dozen guardsmen lined the grey stone walls beneath tall narrow windows. In the center of the room a grey-haired stranger with a fiery red beard stood with his servants, and 4 guardsmen holding shields emblazoned with 2 griffins. Further back, a man stood with the Targaryen banners. His brother was angry. Bran had sensed it as soon as he walked in through the doors. Any servant of the Lord of the 7 Kingdoms is welcome here at Winterfell so long as he comes in peace, Robb was saying with the voice of Robb the Lord. His sword was across his knees, the steel bare for all the world to see. Even Bran knew what it meant to greet a guest with an unsheathed sword. The man's face was lined and leathery, with crow's feet at the corners of his pale, blue eyes. Those eyes seemed to darken when he caught Robb's meaning. Servant. The man's voice was cold. I am more of a lord than you, boy, and I have traveled half of Westeros to come here at your own request. I am the lord here while my mother and father are away, Connington. I am not your boy. Where was Maester Lewin, where was Sir Roderick? The sword in Robb's lap made Bran nervous. Connington. Bran tried to remember. Jon Connington was the hand of the king and one of his oldest friends. What the king dreams, the hand builds, Bran had learned. Except Maester Lewin said it was different now, that it was because of his uncle Brandon and grandfather Rickard that the king couldn't do as he wished anymore. I wrote asking for my wife. Yet I do not see her. Lord Connington was silent. We are searching. You are searching for the princess, still Robb interrupted. A month later. After the accident. Pray tell me, was it a kitchen fire that spread as the first letter stated? Sailors bring with them tales of a green fire that burns still on Dragonstone. I do not know what the king has habit of storing in his kitchens, but Lord Connington's anger was rising too. You might learn a lord's courtesy if you are to sit in your father's seat and play at being ruler. That is your king you speak of, and your wife's own brother. And where is the king? Robb asked. The letters I have are marked with the seal of the Prince of Dragonstone. The Prince of Dragonstone saved your own sister's life. He writes to you in friendship and care. Connington shot back. Even Rob could not deny that. They'd had a letter in Arya's own hand saying as much. She'd woken up to tendrils of smoke slipping in through the cracks of her door, and hadn't been able to get out on her own. It was Prince Aegon who helped her, and Princess Rhaenys and Dany. Only, by the time they had gotten to the sea, she'd turned around and Dany was gone. Rob said the letter hid something, but Bran was happy to see his sister's writing all the same. Winterfell had grown lonely, and sad, and she would be coming home, was making for Darry on the King's Road with Rhaenys' party, and then continuing north with Jory. Mother and father would be back soon too. Sansa was wed now and had to stay in Carhold, but mother and father would come back and maybe Dany too, and then Rob wouldn't have to be Rob the Lord any longer. The prince has the gratitude of my house, Rob said, more courteously now. But I fear you have made the long journey in vain, Lord Connington. I asked for my wife and for the truth of what happened on Dragonstone, not half-lies and evasions. I have supped enough on those. Old Nan had sent him for Rob to tell him that Craig had started crawling. Give your brother a smile, she'd said. But Rob was in no mood to smile. Bran left him to deal with Connington, and returned to his own rooms. Hojan Reed entered unbidden, with his sister Meera behind him. You heard about Lord Connington? Bran asked. The other boy nodded. It wasn't like you said. It was only the hand of the king, and Dany wasn't with him. The green dreams take strange shapes sometimes. The truth of them is not always easy to understand, Hojan admitted. Bran felt he had spent more time dreaming and talking about dreams than he did awake. It was because of the crow. He came to him the night the comet appeared. Late he'd remained awake, watching the red in the sky, and when at last he slept he dreamed of the weirwood. It looked at him with its deep red eyes, calling to him with its twisted wooden mouth, and from its pale branches the three-eyed crow came flapping, pecking at his face and crying his name in a voice as sharp as swords. There were more dreams after that. Both good and bad. And there were Hojan and Meera, and the secrets they shared. Tell me again what you dreamed, Bran said. Does my Lord Prince believe me now? Will he trust my words, no matter how queer they sound in his ears? Bran nodded. I dreamed that the sea was lapping all around Westeros. I saw black waves crashing against gates and towers, and salt water come flowing over the walls and filling castles. I saw burning ships and drowned things floating all around them, lions and wolves and roses. No, not that one. Tell me about the dragons. It is one and the same, Bran. I dreamed of Silver Girl walking with specters and ghouls in a great green forest. I didn't know her face, but now I do. It was Daenerys. She wielded a great red sword. And I dreamt of dragons and their shadows over Winterfell's Godswood, but further north they flew, beyond my reach. Dragons are coming to Winterfell, Bran said, breathless. He'd heard it before, had made Hojan repeat it so many times he would recount it word for word, but each time it left him almost dizzy. Maester Luwin said magic was gone from the world. The dragons are no more, the giants are dead, the children of the forest forgotten. But the dragons were back, he knew it. He had tried to tell Rob, but it only made his brother sadder. For a moment he'd looked at him curiously, but after that he'd furrowed his brow and said they were only dreams, and if they kept spinning tales about Daenerys, he'd have the reeds sent home. It was a bad dream, Bran. Hojan sat on the bed. Tell me what you dream. He had sworn to trust them, and a Stark of Winterfell keeps his sworn word. There's different kinds, he said slowly. There's the wolf dreams, those aren't so bad as the others. I run and hunt and kill squirrels. And there's dreams where the crow comes and tells me to fly. Sometimes the tree is in those dreams too, calling my name. That frightens me. Meera smiled weakly. Is that all? I guess. Walk, said Hojan Reed. Bran looked at him, his eyes wide. What? Warg. Shape changer. Beastling. That is what they will call you, if they should ever hear of your wolf dreams. The names made him afraid again. Who will call me? Your own folk. In fear. Some will hate you if they know what you are. Some will even try to kill you. Old Nan told scary stories of beastlings and shape changes sometimes. In the stories they were always evil. I'm not like that, Bran said. I'm not. It's only dreams. The wolf dreams are no true dreams. You have your eye closed tight whenever you're awake, but as you drift off it flutters open and your soul seeks out its other half. The power is strong in you. I don't want it. I want to be a knight. A knight is what you want. A warg is what you are. You can't change that, Bran, you can't deny it or push it away. You are the winged wolf, but you will never fly. Unless you open your eye. He put 2 fingers together and poked Bran in the forehead, hard. When he raised his hand to the spot, Bran felt only the smooth unbroken skin. There was no eye, not even a closed one. How can I open it if it's not there? You will never find the eye with your fingers, Bran. You must search with your heart. Hojan studied Bran's face with those strange green eyes the color of moss. Or are you afraid? Mayor Stillowin says there's nothing in dreams that a man need fear. He says they might mean anything or nothing. There is, said Hojan. What? The past. The future. The truth. They left him more muddled than ever. When he was alone, Bran tried to open his third eye, but he didn't know how. No matter how he wrinkled his forehead and poked at it, he couldn't see any different than he'd done before. He only remembered what he'd wanted to tell Robb by evening. When his brother wasn't in the yard practicing his drills or locked away with Mayor Stillowin and Sir Roderick, he was in his room. Sometimes, Bran would find Cregan in there, Robb urging him to play with his toys, or sitting quietly together by the window. Tonight, his brother was alone, crying. He looked at Bran with red eyes, and wiped his tears on the back of his sleeve. Dany will come back, Bran said, softly. He wouldn't say anything about Hojan's dreams, not anymore, but Hojan said his dreams always came true. His brother was quiet for a while. But when he spoke, his voice was shaking. It's been a month already, Bran. He breathed deeply to steady himself. Suddenly, there was anger in his look. Something's not right. The light burns green. Green means wildfire. Why was there wildfire on Dragonstone? Robb had spoken like this before, like it was a riddle he was trying to work out, but Bran didn't know how to help. What did Lord Connington say? Little and less. I had half a mind to send him away, but I didn't dare. Robb sighed. His brother seemed half a stranger to him now. By day he was locked in the Solar with Mayor Stillowin and Sir Roderick, going over accounts, or ferociously working at his drills in the yard. He took his dinner alone with his son, and retired to his rooms early, leaving Bran and Rickon to eat with Old Nan. Cregan started crawling, he said, weakly. His brother only gave him a half smile. I saw. Father will know what to do. Once he gets here, everything will be better. Robb put his face in his hands, and for a moment Bran thought he would weep again, but he pulled back just as quickly and sat up straight. What can he do? Can he turn back time? Can he raise the dead? I mean to be gone by the time he arrives. I will find my wife, or bring, he breathed in sharply, or bring what's left of her to rest in Winterfell. The Targaryens were buried under King's Landing. Old Nan said there were ghosts there, and dungeons where terrible things had been done, and dragon heads on the walls. Or Dragonstone. But Dragonstone was likely gone, even if Lord Connington wouldn't admit it. Everyone said so. There were all sorts of rumors. He heard his guards and the women at the well speaking of it. They said that the old king was dead, the new king was dead, that Daenerys was dead, that all the Targaryens were gone. Others said it was witchcraft, some a whole once over, or that the Dragonmont erupted and has burned the island whole. Farlin the Kennel Master said it was the ghosts of Bittersteel and Maelys the monstrous and demon Blackfyr, come to take the kingdom for their own. Winterfell's crypts had never held any fear for Bran, they were part of his home and who he was, and he had always known that one day he would lie here too. But they would be lonely for Dany. Bran didn't have the heart to say that to his brother. He thought of the morning their father had woken them all up and gathered them to tell them the baby was born, and that they were all aunts and uncles now. Thinking of that made him think of the wedding feast, when Robb and Dany had kissed in front of everyone, and they'd all cheered for them, even Hodder. It made him think of the princess, who always spoke to him as though he was a man grown and not a little boy, who never seemed annoyed when he asked her for nightly stories. And that made him think of the baby. Rukon said he was no fun at all, that all he did was sleep, but Bran loved his nephew all the same. He was funny, always smiling, and he looked just like him, except for that little bit of silver. He imagined Cregan going down to the cold crypts to visit his mother, descending the dark steps and walking past the statues of the kings of winter to find her tomb. It made Bran's stomach twist. "I'll go with you, I can help you," he said. "You're a good brother, Bran. But Cregan needs you more." "What about the war? What if the wildlings attack?" Robb shook his head. "Mormont is still ranging beyond the wall. It will be months yet. I'll be home by then." There were so many things Bran wished to say to his brother. He wanted to tell him about his dreams again, tell him what Hojan said he was. And he wanted to ask him about his, see if the three-eyed crow visited him too. But he was too scared. Instead, Bran reached out and took his hand. His brother left on a cold, windy morning. With him went Clesa Wyn, Darin Hornwood, Robin Flint and Owen Nuri. "Cregan is the lord in Winterfell now," Robb told him. He was mounted on a shaggy grey stallion, his shield hung from the horse's side, wood banded with iron, white and grey, and on it the snarling face of a direwolf. His brother wore grey chainmail over bleached leathers, sword and dagger at his waist, a fur-trimmed cloak across his shoulders. "Take care of him and Rukon. Listen to Maester Lewin's counsel. Mother and father will be home soon." "I know," Bran replied miserably. He had never felt so little or alone or scared. He did not know how to take care of everyone. "You are a Stark, don't forget," Robb said. "You have a duty." Bran nodded. Robb wheeled his courser around and trotted away. Grey Wind followed, loping beside the warhorse, lean and swift. Clesa Wyn went before them through the gate, carrying the rippling white banner of House Stark atop a high standard of grey ash. Darin Hornwood and the Robin Flint fell in on either side of Robb while Owen Nuri followed in the back. Bran watched him leave with a dull ache. Dany. The forest was deep, with nothing but pines for leagues and leagues. The Kingswood, Dany had hoped, prayed, on the first day. It sounded and smelled like the sea, a sweet, faint murmuring. "I can walk to King's Landing, I can go to the gates of the Red Keep and ask to see the king." Only, part of her knew she was far away yet. She'd seen nothing as she flew in the dark, no torches, no city. She was alone in the world. Rescue did not come. She had held on to that hope at first, but she saw no men, neither knights nor small folk. "They think me dead," she thought, "they think I have burned or my body remains under the black stones of the stone drum still. Perhaps they had all died. But no, that couldn't be, they had enough time to escape, surely. Someone would see her dragons, and when they came to explore they would find her too." Other times, she suspected the dragons had taken her to another land entirely, some place that was only a shadow of Westeros, filled only with animals, that fled when she came close, and ghosts. "Perhaps I am in hell. Not the seven hells, but the hell of the Valyrians of old, where the hearts of fire of the 14 flames were evermore extinguished, and all that was left was cold ruin." It made her want to weep. But she did not. A dragon could not weep. If they thought her weak, her dragons would leave her, here in this strange forest where they seemed to have lingered for an eternity, where the going was slow and naked and barefoot. Dany had made her way through the air, grey and green and still, and the pine boughs which scratched against her arms and thighs. The comet was her hope, she told herself as she gazed up into the night sky with wonder in her heart. "The gods have sent it to show me the way." Besieged by trees, she followed it, east. She ate berries and suckled water from a fresh stream and slept by glistening green bogs and under dark skies, past sinkholes and caves and the ruins of ancient strongholds whose stones were blanketed in moss. One day, she found a yard of rotten rope and tied her arm down to her side. The pain had not been so bad after that, and she could scramble after her dragons quicker. Every day, she caught sight of them, sometimes so far off that they might have been eagles, slipping in and out distant clouds, other times closed as they passed before the sun, their wings spread and darkening the world. Each night the world darkened, she thought it would be her last. She had no skill to build a fire and the forest cold by night. And ghosts came to her in her green bed. Some she knew, though she could not name. They were silver-haired and beautiful and fearsome, and she saw them as kin, even the ones who appeared with gaping wounds in their chests, or burned faces. Rorigan never came to her, nor Egon, Rhaenys, or Viserys. It means they are alive, she thought. Worst of all was the handsome young man whose purple eyes watched her from the trees as she slept. From night to night he would change, as the candle flickers, from laughing, dazzling boy to king, his crown large and heavy, to beast, with matted and tangled hair, fingernails like yellow talons and 100 scabs on his thin body. But it was when he was young and whole and smiling that he frightened her the most. Another was a woman in a red lacquer mask. "Beware," the woman said. Her eyes were wet and shiny behind her mask. None of the other shades had spoken to her. And it disturbed her that she could not see the woman's face. "Of who?" Dany asked. "Of all. They shall come day and night to see the wonder that has been born again into the world, and when they see they shall lust. For dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power. There is no one." "No one has come," Dany replied warily. It felt strange to use her voice after so long. But then the woman left too, and Daenerys Targaryen awoke each morning, weak and hungry, and walked on, her torn and wounded feet crushing nettles and cold dirt with each step, leaving a trail of blood behind her. "If I die, it will have been worth it," she thought, "flying was worth it." But she did not die, she followed her dragons and the comet, because where they went, warmth went with them. The castle came upon her without warning. One moment she was in the depths of the forest, with nothing but pines to see. Then she walked around a boulder, and a gap appeared ahead. A mile farther on, the forest ended abruptly. Beyond was sky and sea and an ancient, tumble-down castle, abandoned and overgrown on the edge of a cliff. Her silver dragon was perched high on the old, unmortared stones, and all around him moss grew thick in clefts between the rocks, and trees sprouted up from the foundations. Dany tugged at the rotten gates, and half of it came down on her, long wet splinters falling over her face and body. Inside was all green gloom where the forest had breached the walls. To her left, what might have been a stable was filled with sapling poking out of the stalls and growing through the dry brown thatch of its roof. To her right, were rotted wooden steps descending into an empty darkness. The keep was not more than a pile of collapsed stones, overgrown with green and purple moss. And atop of it was the carcass of a sheep, half-eaten, heat gliding off its ripped-open stomach. The silver dragon watched her from his perch as she carefully approached, stepping over collapsed stones. "If I touch his kill, he will eat me too," Dany thought. But the hunger was gnawing at her. "If I do not eat, I will die either way." They watched each other in silence, and when he made no move to obstruct her, Dany feasted on the dragon's leavings, on burned bones and chunks of soaking meat, half charred and half raw. She had tried these past weeks to remember all that she knew of dragons. It was said that even Aegon the Conqueror never dared mount Vigor or Meraxes, nor did his sisters mount Balerion the Black Dread. Balerion had other riders after Aegon died, but no rider ever flew 2 dragons. The Black Dragon was hers now, for as long as she lived. She had brought them all into the world though, all 3, though she would ride only the one, watched as they woke from their eternal rest and the gods breathed fire and blood into them. I must protect them, Dany thought. This waking world was strange to them. If this is the waking world. When Dany was done, the dragon was gone and she was alone once more. Sated, if only temporarily, she began to walk once more. There were soldier pines everywhere, drawn up in solemn ranks. And in their midst was a pale strange, a slender young weirwood with a white trunk and dark red leaves sprouting from its reaching branches. Beyond was the emptiness of the sky and sea where the wall had collapsed. It had no carved face, but Dany stared at it just the same. "Where am I?" she asked it, not knowing why. When last she was in front of a weirwood, she was wed. But the old gods hadn't spoken then, and they didn't now. The sea's pull was stronger. A faint, soft murmuring that seemed to be coming from the ground. The waves had eaten holes in the cliffs below and were rumbling through caves and tunnels beneath the earth. At the cliff's edge, where the curtain wall had collapsed, she found a huge blackberry bramble growing over a heap of broken stones. She edged as close to the precipice as she dared, and saw where the waves swirled in and over the remnants of a shattered tower. Further along on the horizon was a strange light, like the gods were burning a green candle that fought with the sun and won, painting the sky the color of sick. Dragonstone, Dany realized suddenly. It was still burning. If that was Dragonstone, it meant she was at Crackclaw Point. North, she would find the Den, and westwards down the coast was Rook's Rest, where Sunfi the Golden had taken refuge during the Dance of the Dragons. Both too far. Closer, across the bay, was Claw Isle, but even if she made it across, Lord Celtigar was ever known for his greed and was as likely to seize her dragons for himself as aid her. Would her dragons allow it? At times, they seemed to barely tolerate her presence, flying off when she came too close and looking over their backs as they flew away from her as though to mock her for her slowness. Once, the black dragon had flown right above her, so close she could hear the sound of his wings, and for half a heartbeat she thought he was hunting her. But he only flew on without taking any notice. Dany looked down at the water and glimpsed the mouth of a large cavern. No boats though, and even if there were, she could not climb down the cliff face. Her bronze dragon had no such problems. It was dipping its snout under the water and catching fish with its mouth. The sight of him made Dany giggle. "Fish stealer," Dany said. But no, the poor beast. It did not sound fearsome at all. Sea flame, that was better. It was Robb who had named their son, but to her dragons she was mother and father both. Aegon's dragons were named for the gods of old Valyria. It was said that Vigor's breath was so hot that it could melt a knight's armor and cook the man inside, that Meraxes swallowed horses whole, and Balerion, his wings were vast, that whole towns were swallowed up in their shadow when he passed overhead. Her black dragon had ever stood atop the stone drum, and every she had walked in the darkness he cast. Where his darkness went, she would always be safe. Shadow Tamer, Dany said out loud. And for the Silver, who had a habit of playing with the setting sun, flying in and out of its light as though chasing his own tail, Dany gave the name Bridezan. They had played. They had hunted. They had been named. Enough, she thought. Enough. She could not walk any longer, could not swim or sail. But she could fly. A girl might spend her life at play, but she was a woman grown, a wife, a mother. Her child had need of her and she had need of him. And her husband. The thought of them suddenly made her feel weak. Remember, she commanded herself. Her son's hair was soft, and his eyes were bright and alert. He liked to be bathed, liked to be fed at her breast, to be held by his father. He cried infrequently and smiled often. But when he slept, he balled his hands in fists. The day he was born, Robb had come to her when she was alone, and pressed a kiss to each of her hands and to her forehead. And her featherbed was warm, and in the night she would reach over and put her hand on her husband's chest, or run them down his back for no reason other than that she could. Sometimes he would stir, and they would make love in the dark, not knowing nor caring what time it was. Other nights, he would complain her hands were cold, but there would be a smile to his voice and he wouldn't pull away from her. He had married a princess. What was she now? Kinslayer, the sea seemed to say. I didn't know. Dany protested. It was Sir Oswell who held my hand and forced me. And Rhaegar. That was a bitter thought. He was desperate, he thought the fate of the world hung in the balance. But Aegon had the right of it. He had cursed them all. Murderer, the cliffs cried. No. No. She was Daenerys Targaryen, daughter of dragons, bride of dragons, mother of dragons. She remembered the words once more. And this was not the life she was born to. Dany called until her voice was hoarse, and the dragons came, snorting plumes of smoke. The gods would bow down before them, pines that stood for 1,000 years breaking in two. It was the black dragon she had ridden as she flew from Dragonstone, and it was the black dragon she leapt on now. Her bare legs tightened around his neck. She kicked him, softly at first and then hard, and he threw himself into the sky. North, Dany's heart leapt. But no, she could not yet. She had a duty. It was difficult to remember, here atop her dragon where the troubles of the world seemed so small. The dragons are not for my pleasure. They are for the prince that was promised, and for the coming cold. South it was to be, south once more. Fly, Dany cried, fly. With her right hand and her feet, she tried to turn the dragon south. He obeyed, gliding on wings through clouds that whipped by like the banners of some ghostly army. They flew south by west, along the coast, leaving behind the endless forest to where the green ground cleared. She glimpsed Rook's Rest to her left and Maiden Pool, the very edge of it. A lifetime ago, Roriger and his bastard son had awaited her there. They'd gifted her a horse, and together they had ridden to Riverrun to give her to her groom. Inside her had been a dull sort of fear. Where the green gloom faded, riders appeared. They were ants to her from here, but she saw them all the same, one at the front and a dozen more at his back. She urged her dragon down and she could see them clearer now, the man at the front who wore white, the others holding banners. The three-headed dragon, she realized with joy. They have come to find me. One by one, they lifted their heads upwards. They stood frozen until their horses began to whicker in fear, and then woke as if from a dream, wheeled their mounts about, and raced off at a gallop. All but the White Knight, who stood at their front. Her heart soared at the sight, but just as quickly, her dragon ascended once more. The other two followed at their leisure. Are they scared? That was a strange thought. Dragons were not shy of anything. They were drawn away though, gliding back to the sea. Back to the sea and back to the green. No, not there, Dany thought, desperately. It would have been braver to close her eyes, braver to turn away from it all. But she could not. She watched with a fixed fascination as the island grew closer and the wreckage appeared beneath her. The sea was strangely empty. It was usually choking with ships, and fishing vessels and smaller ferries and skiffs. She sighted the odd galley, but little more. It was as though she had returned to another age. Closer to Dragonstone, the ashes fell like a soft grey snow, even here, even in the clouds as the wind swirled around them, hot with the smell of brimstone, of burnt wood and burnt man. The green fire glowed still, but it had moved like a flood to the southern end of the keep, leaving in its wake black stones turned atop each other and gargoyles shattered on the ground, cradled within the still standing outer walls like a nest that held broken eggs. The stone dragons were gone. No, Dany reminded herself, 3 remain, 3 fly with me yet. They are a part of Dragonstone, and this was their home too. This was the citadel the Targaryens had built with their lost magic. Each stone was burned and marked with dragon flame. This was where they had first fled, where they raised dragons, where Aegon the Conqueror had planned his invasion. It was where Alysanne and Jaehaerys had wed in love, where Joffrey Valerian was installed as Prince of Dragonstone, where Rhaenyra fled. It had held the ashes of Aegon, of Maegor, of the daughters of the good Queen Alysanne. It was where Daenerys had been born, it was where her mother died. And it was where woken the dragons and destroyed it all. No, no. The stone drum had been her work. The rest was the fire. The rest was the green. Dragonstone had become a soot stain. Away, Dany cried, we cannot land here. Away, away. With all her might, she pulled at the scales on her dragon's neck. We can grieve later, she wanted to say to them, but now we must live. To the Dragonmont they returned, not through this time but around to the mighty mountain's sea-facing side. A herd of white goats trod the secret paths here, but had not even the chance to look up before her dragon bore down upon them. He descended, roaring, and all at once the poor beasts were aflame, caught up in black fire. They kept on running, screaming with every step. His brothers joined. The silver ate his while it still kicked, but hers and the bronze landed on their prey and broke their backs, and made slower work of it. Dany slid off his back. Her silver dragon had his fill quickly and happily curled up near the water, resting its head on its own tail, while the bronze burrowed into a smoking vent. The black dragon was not so easily sated. He consumed its kill slowly, tearing at the charred flesh. Dany, starved, ate with him, ripping chunks of smoking meat from the dead goat with bare, burned hands. As the sky turned the color of a bloody bruise, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Dany rose, wiped her hands on her bare chest, and went to stand beside her dragon. It was there that Aegon found her. There was a red scarf wrapped around his nose and mouth to keep the smoke away, but his silver braid and his eyes gave him away. At his back, his companions carried spears, their shields emblazoned with the red sun of his mother's house. When her dragon saw them, it raised its head and looked at them with eyes as red as coals. With one gesture, Aegon stilled his men from advancing. Wordless, they fell to their knees. Not Aegon, though. A prince of Dragonstone does not kneel, Dany thought with a smile. Her nephew pulled the covering down from his face with gloved, shaking hands, and in his look was wonder. "Dragons," he murmured, his voice soft as a kiss. His eyes never leaving them, he untied the black satin cloak from his shoulders and held it out for her. Dany clumsily shrugged it on, covering her nakedness. She was as small and skinny as a boy now. Breathless, Aegon said, "He is Balerion the Dread come again. Black scales, black wings, and black fire. The dragon, or the cat?" Her nephew began to laugh. It started a polite courtier's chuckle, until it grew louder in his gullet and descended into hysterical laughter. Dany smiled as he put his hands on his knees to steady himself before at last rising, and wiping the tears from his eyes. When at last he collected himself he said, "Fierce as both, I think." Notes. Thank you so much to everyone for your lovely comments to the last chapter. I was so moved by your response and so grateful that so many of you took the time to comment and chat with me. Hearing your thoughts and has been so generative and reaffirming for me, I can't begin to put it into words. Thank you. Something I have done in the past when writing AUS is faithfully replicate keystone moments from the book to give my writing some structure. In the fic, I've pulled from certain scenes and descriptions, but I've noticed this in other, wonderful Asoya 4 fics, where the overall plot could be really different, but events like Bran falling and Robb dying Red Wedding-esque events still happen. I didn't want to lean on that here. I think it would have made little sense for Bran to have someone push him. In canon, that's what helps open his third eye. For Hojan, it's getting sick as a child. Here, I have tied it instead to the world-breaking event of the birth of the dragons and magic growing in the world, particularly as we know Bran as a very gifted green seer /warg, more so than Hojan probably. I hope that it comes across as plausible. I lied when I said no Dany chapter. I couldn't leave her hanging for another week. I drew on the creepiness of one of Brian's chapters where she's in the Whispers. I thought the ruins and haunting would be an apt setting for someone trying to make sense of their own role in creating a fresh wasteland on Dragonstone, and perhaps more unintended destruction to come. And the dragons have names. I do have to say, I hate the canon names. 2 out of 3 are named after people that directly abused her. I had her go more descriptive here, more in the spirit of Sunfi, Sheepstella, Silverwing, dragons she would have grown up hearing stories about as opposed to crappy men. Thank you to Ghost who suggested I do a mood board at the start of the chapter. Playing around with facecasts has been really fun. Thank you again everyone. Chapter 13, Interlude, Daenerys. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. The king looked up at the dragonmont with tears welling in his eyes. The dragons were far off, too high up for her to see through the smoke and the haze of here that had settled over the island, but even here the air was filled with the sound of their wings. For a moment, Dany wondered what would happen should they fly away. What a jape that would be. To birth the first dragons the world had seen in centuries, only to lose them. They had their chance to flee in the forest though, could have been halfway across the world once Shadowtamer threw her off his back, but they lingered still, as she had. Dutiful dragons. Was there ever such a thing? Nothing remained of what had been her home, nothing but fire and flames, and a crude campsite on the shore where Aegon's Dornish knights sat uneasily, their hands clutching their spears. No life lingered on the island save them and her dragons. Rhaenys was away, Aegon told her, returning to Riverrun with Arya Stark in tow. A child had been born to Viserys, a little boy his wife named Maron, but her brother was in King's Landing, not Sunspear, speaking for the king in his absence. The King's Guard were abroad too. There were 100 tales, none of them the same. Dragons in Crackclaw Point and the ghost of a girl witch calling out to them in the woods. Dragons on the sea, laying waste to passing ships. Dragons in Dorne, doing what Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters could not do. They chased them all, and it was Sir Barristan who she had seen at the foot of the forest, who her dragons had no desire to meet. Other matters the Prince of Dragonstone only danced around. Prince of Dragonstone? No, Prince of Ash and Hell. He shared something vague, of ships burning in Lannisport and raiders at the shore, but spoke longer over what they had done since she flew. Rhaegar and Aegon had lingered, when hope had been lost that she could remain alive yet, floating in the water or buried and breathing under burning stone. He would not say it, but they remained for the dragons she knew, remained for the dream of them, that this had all not been for naught, waiting for the fires to burn out so they could search the ruins. And with warm hands, he touched her arm and clicked her shoulder back in place so rapidly that by the time she cried out, the pain was gone. And then he left her, to bathe alone in the sea and dress in 2 large men's clothing and boots, and went to fetch their king. When at last she saw Roriger, emerging from the mountain through rocky paths she did not know, for a moment he seemed an old man, his silver hair turned to grey, his skin a sickly pallor. It is only the falling ash, Dany realized. It coated his hair and shoulders, like some ghastly cloak. Ever had he been clean-shaven, but he had grown a beard in her absence. Alone, walking carefully over stone and dirt, he seemed almost like the last man left in Westeros. Her brother smiled when he saw her, and it did not matter that it didn't quite reach his eyes, or that when they embraced he pulled away quickly, inspected her for too long before speaking. "What happened to your hair?" he asked, at last. Dany had almost forgotten. "It burned away. And your clothes too." "Yes. Everything. Everything but me. Everything but you," Roriger said, quietly, strangely. "You are well otherwise." "Yes." Her shoulder ached, but it would be nothing to her soon. The gnawing in her stomach was a different sort of pain. "If I could have some food." Roriger motioned to his son, who nodded but made no move to leave them. "You have returned from the dead with 3 dragons in tow. A tale for the singers surely," his voice was almost a whisper. "Stone dragons, not mere stones. A princess, not a princess. And a sacrifice none could have foreseen, blood and home and kin." It did not seem such a wonder to him. He pieced the puzzle in his mind, fitting things he may have suspected and found confirmed, and between them lay secrets unsaid. The father they had burned, the sin they committed. The sin he commanded. Was that the abomination the gods required? Or the wildfire perhaps? Dany had seen no sign of the pyromancers on the Isle so far. Or Dragonstone. Perhaps Dragonstone had been the price, that and her hair and her milk and everything that had fallen from her at the foot of the pyre. All of that was past. She looked at it now as she might have looked through a cracked window pane, torn and jagged and indistinct. Dany glanced past her brother, to where the mainland lay to the west. The sea was uneasy today, purging kelp and weed on the sand before pulling them back in. Her first memories were of walking barefoot on these shores, crushing the green-brown bulbs under her feet. "Have you had any word of my son?" Roriger nodded curtly. "Lord Connington saw the child in Winterfell. I believe he is well." "Lord Connington? Winterfell?" Dany frowned. "Your husband writes for King's Landing now with a handful of companions," Egon offered, by way of explanation. He seemed to watch his father, just as his father watched her. "King's Landing? Why? To what end?" "He writes for the truth." Roriger sighed. "And for justice, though he is not fool enough to say it." "Do I have your leave to go to him?" she asked without thinking. Her hair was burned away and she was skinny as a boy, but what did that matter? "He thinks me dead," Dany realized. And the loss of her pained him, enough to send him forward from Winterfell. Her brother stared at her for a long moment. On Dragonback? If she rode out, or sailed, would her dragons follow? Or would they remain here evermore, to their home and their mountain? No, at last she admitted. They must be trained, or else they would lay everything to waste. Her dragons had been happy enough in the forest, picking off prey easily, facing neither danger nor want. But to get north, they would fly past castles and villages. What then? 100 questions remained. She did not know how long they could fly without needing to rest, nor what they would do should they grow hungry and find no animals to feast on. And what if the small folk screamed at the sight of them, and some fool thought himself a hero and tried to harm them? Or claim one? A letter will do. Egon will help you write it. My son has a way with words. Until then you are to remain here. He looked out to the horizon, staring at the empties of Blackwater Bay. There are things you must learn, although I do not have the skill to teach you. That knowledge died with the last dragon. We will do what we can, though the sands are flowing quickly through the glass. Dany hesitated. What must I learn? How to bend your dragon to your will in all things. You have ridden one. The Black Egon answered, before she could. Only Roriga could speak to her about dragons in the tone of a man politely questioning a farmer on how his harvest fared, or speaking with a stable boy of horse flesh. How could she tell him that she had ridden her dragon only twice, and each time he could have thrown her off as easily as a donkey might swish its tail at a fly? How could she tell him how it felt to fly, and not know where her dragon might take her, if he would take her to death and ruin and played like Princess Aeya? Perhaps he would know soon. The dragon had 3 heads and each needed a rider. Once they were claimed and trained, north they would go to whatever awaited them beyond the wall, the horrors Mormont had convinced them of. And then, she did not know. I have ridden Shadow Tamer, Dany confirmed. He brought me here.